Welcome to the Talk and Chatter experience powered by Gasolinelli Harley Davidson, TCX Boots Australia and Moto Products. My guest today is Josh Bailey, a motorcycle enthusiast and one of the co-founders of Skinny Social, a motorcycle garage in Brisbane. In this show, we discuss Josh's unique tale of how he got into motorcycling, his couple of tours overseas for the Defence Force, drones, a story about a van, and many other great yarns. I really hope everyone enjoys the show. Josh is a fantastic storyteller and gives me a real insight into his life in this one. There's a few heavy moments in there, but some fantastic stories along the way. So hope you enjoy it. Hit subscribe on our YouTube and we'll catch you up with another show very soon. Welcome, Josh Bailey.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Good to be here.
Yep.
And finally, after about 18 months of following Talk and Chatter, or almost 2 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 years on May 7 was the first one with Brian Farrow. So
yeah,
we've been on a journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been following it really closely, and I really like what you're doing and the long form content sort of thing, and actually getting people's stories out. I really like that part of Talk and Chatter. So I feel really blessed to be on here, I suppose.
Mate, you don't have to be that. You make me feel funny about it. But no, it's good to have you on here. And we've spoken obviously in face-to-face a few times and through message for those 18 months as well. So, yeah, it's nice to sit down and have a long-form conversation today. And as I say, we met up and probably, I think it might have been December. We're going to do it 4 weeks later.
Yeah.
And 4 weeks turned into 16 to 20 or something like that. But we're here now. So who's Josh Bailey?
And I think everybody that comes on here probably does that noise when you ask them who is, whatever their name is. But good question. So I am now one of the co-founders of Skinny's Social Garage, which is a members garage based in Brisbane. And we kind of provide the space and tools and advice for people to be able to work on their own bikes. But I suppose without a bit of my background, you might just assume that I've been in the motorcycle industry my whole life. And to be honest, I haven't. I've only really been into motorcycles in my adult years because when I was a young fella, I wasn't exposed to motorbikes other than maybe my dad working on them or something like that. But I just didn't have motorbikes as a kid. And then I sort of saw some stuff later on as an adult, and it was actually Stories of Bike by Cam Elkins.
Yep.
And the way that people talked about riding a bike, I was like, that's really interesting, and it looks super cathartic almost. And so that was actually when I was overseas in the Middle East. So a bit of my background is I was in the army for about 10 years full-time and then 5 years part-time, and deployed a couple of times to the Middle East and Afghanistan. And when you're over there and it's quiet, which is, surprisingly more often than not, they had just good enough internet to be able to surf the web and maybe look at YouTube. And this is 10, 12 years ago now, right? So, YouTube wasn't as massive as it is now. But I saw these sort of stories and the way people described riding a bike, and it was just intrigued me. So as soon as I got back to Australia, I bought a bike and got on the road and just sort of found that I was experiencing the world in a completely different way.
Yep.
I was, the one thing that I really notice on a bike that you never notice in a car is smell. It's actually, you can smell like a campfire wafting through a valley, or like the trees in spring, freshly cut grass. And it sounds a bit weird, but when you're in a sealed container like a car,
Yep.
You just don't get that. And I was hooked immediately. So I've been a bit of a bike tragic ever since, and it didn't really help that my first bike was a 1969 Triumph Daytona, and everybody made jokes about it when they saw it, and I didn't really get it, and I was like, it's 7, 8 9 years now I've had that thing, and it's still getting rebuilt because it just spent very little time on the road because it was so unreliable.
You run out of spinners with one of those.
And they're Whitworth.
Yeah.
In some, like, it's not Imperial, it's not metric,
Yep.
it's Whitworth.
It's
like
a
they made their
BSW,
own.
isn't it? British Standard Whitworth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And like you can get away with most metric or Imperial swapping.
Yep.
But there's just, you get to one nut that is like ridiculous.
Wow.
You just can't get anything to fit it. So.
Do you know the history of that bike?
Yeah. So they actually produced them after they won Daytona, the Daytona 500, I think it was.
Wow.
In 19, I'll probably get this wrong, 67, I think it was. And so they built a specific racing bike, and it was a 500cc twin.
Yep.
And so previously, I think the Bonneville motors at the time were about a 650. So it was a bit of a step change for them. But apparently the motor is a really good motor, but just leaks oil all the time. So
yeah, which probably did from 1969. Like because you're after that area of leather seals and stuff, aren't you? Is there any of that in that? At that time? It's all out of that.
Yeah.
So we're out of that era.
Yeah.
Into the new era of neoprene and the rubbers and stuff. But
Yep.
still, they had the issues that were inherent for those years, you know. So
yeah, and they just couldn't manufacture to the tolerances that we have these days.
Correct.
Like a flat surface back then was pretty good, but like a flat surface nowadays is like down to, you know, I don't know, like 100,000th of a millimetre or something ridiculous. But I actually got some tips from my old man who'd built his own BSA when he was a young fella.
wow.
And he said if you glue some sandpaper down to a glass sheet, because glass is perfectly flat, then you grab the primary cover. It's a bit harder if you've got obviously the case,
Yep.
but just whatever covers you can get off, and you just kind of cross hatch it gently, you'll get almost a perfect surface.
Yep.
So I tried that myself, and to be honest, I don't have the skill to do it. It sounds easy. It's like, you know, when you watch stuff on YouTube and they're like, just do this, and you try it yourself and you're like, no, I need a professional to do this.
It's so bad, even to the point of, and this is, everyone's probably going to laugh at this that's listening, but even to the point of changing tyres on a bike. It looks so easy. Like I watch Gemma Wilson, like MX Store, right, ran the while COVID was on.
Yeah.
There's not much content because that first 2 months wasn't much happening, you know. But they ran a tyre changing contest. They had like Jeff Ballard, Jessica Gardner, Gemma Wilson, like a whole lot of different MX riders and that, see who could change the tyre the quickest. And I looked at it and I'm like I haven't even found a tyre lever by the time they've got a tyre on.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
YouTube makes it look so easy.
Oh.
Everything.
Oh. And to be honest, I'm a bit spoiled. We've got a tyre machine at Skinny's. So.
Yeah.
And
this is where we get to with this too.
Yeah.
This is the idea of having one of these places, I guess.
Yeah. And so actually one of the boys brought down 3 tyres the other day to change. He's got a new Tenere, actually, a T7, which, geez, they're a good bike.
Yeah.
Oh, super tempted. There's like 3 of them that have bought bikes in the last like couple of months because they jumped on the Tenere, rode it for like 20 minutes and went, I've got to buy one of these. But geez, I should be sponsored by Yamaha for this, I reckon.
Yeah, it's going right.
So he brought his tyres down to change, and we got it on the machine, and we were just having the worst time with his rim lock. And one of the guys is like, you know what is actually easier is changing these just with levers because of that rim lock, because it pinches the tyre between the rim and the rim lock.
Yep.
And we just struggled to get it on when it was on the tyre machine, and we spent like half an hour on this stupid tyre, and then once we got that one done, the other 2 took 5 minutes apiece.
Wow.
So it's just a bit of a learning experience. Once you know it and do the right things and that sort of stuff, you get it much faster the second, third, fourth time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Repetitive process. That's all it is. Just complete repetitive process. When when you're deployed, obviously, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but you're obviously in a camp. You've got time, you've got downtime. There's chaos everywhere, but there's downtime as well when you're looking at things.
Yeah.
Have you ever been injured, just in general?
Oh, all the time.
Is it like that when you're sitting in a camp watching things on YouTube where you're like, you're saying about watching motorcycles? You know, when you're injured, you see something online and you go, gee, I'd love to try that. Was that what it was like over there when you're seeing the bikes?
Because
You can't.
Yeah.
Was it like that?
I reckon so.
All right.
Like I came back, and this is going to sound weird, but I really appreciated good grass when I got back.
Wow.
And I know it sounds weird, but because
Like the stuff for your feet too, isn't it?
just nice soft grass. The ground stuff, not the actually apparently the Cannabis Party might get a seat in the recent election. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. But the feeling of nice soft grass, because over there it's just harsh, rocky dirt. Wow. And then there's some really nice green belts of like I guess bushes and trees and all that sort of stuff. So it's not all just complete rocky desert, but it's just not, like good old Queensland blue cooch. That just stuff. Yeah, I know. And I'm going to sound like a classic dad there, but it's just you can't beat some of those things you've grown up with and find that comfort in. I think it's the comfort that you get out of that, but the lack of all of that while you're over there is like a lot of what puts a lot of, I guess, stress and pressure, and it all sort of compounds together, I suppose. Yeah,
it's like a deprivation. You're sort of deprived of some of those things you take, like grass. You take it really for granted, especially at the moment. Like you tread on it and go, damn, this thing's getting mud through my feet. And, But that's something I've never heard someone say. Probably yourself, like, and amongst your peers, and that it's probably something you spoke of a fair bit.
Yeah, I suppose so. Everybody's got different things though as well that they miss. But the commonality is that they miss things, right? And that's like you hit on exactly right. There's the deprivation piece. Yeah, and when you get home, it makes it also so much better just being back home and having all those familiar things and getting to, just kind of do what you want to do.
Yep. just enjoy you know.
Yeah.
So you did a couple of tours?
Yeah. So 2010, I was over mostly in our Minhad Air Base, which is actually just out of Dubai. And that's a big staging area for the ADF.
Wow.
And that was it was a good trip. I learned quite a bit, but it was a pretty hard trip, to be honest, because we lost a lot of guys on that trip, and I was unlucky enough to be sort of running the mortuary at the time. So our job was to make sure that we showed them the proper respect and got them back home to their families, safely. And so it kind of that was a pretty high pressure and sad time, to be honest. Yeah.
How long were you over there for on that time?
9.5 months.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So at that time, for some reason, they used to do 6-month trips, and then they made them into like 9-month trips.
9 months, that's
yeah. It was pretty much a year was gone.
Yeah.
And I was posted to Brisbane at the time, so you do a bunch of work-up training. So basically got into Brisbane in like January, kick off straight off into work-up training and forced preparation, they call it. And then, deployed over there, and it was mid-December by the time I got back.
Far out, it's a year, isn't it?
Yeah. And there was like, it's not as bad for us as it is for the Yanks. They do like 12 to 18 months over there. I don't know how they handle that, but I think part of it also is if you are prepared to go for 18 months, you're mentally there.
Yes.
And your brain can handle it. I think the really tough one is when people get trips extended and they didn't expect them to be extended.
Yep.
And it's like that just does people's heads in, I think.
Yeah, that's got to come into consideration. Like Oh man, I can't even think of how hard that'd be. You know, it's 2022 now. That's 2010. You said you're in defence for around 10 years.
Yeah.
So you must have been pretty fresh into it as well at that time.
Yeah, so I joined as a fresh, young, just 19-year-old in 2006. So I went through the Royal Military College in Duntroon, Canberra, and graduated as a lieutenant, an officer, and had, I think, a couple of years in Townsville, and then came to Brisbane, and that was when I deployed for the first time.
Did you ever think you'd be deployed?
Yeah.
It was on. Yeah.
The world at that time was kind of still feeling the ripples of 9/11, and I know myself as a teenager, when I saw what happened, I was like, wow, that's world changing, you know. And even though, you know, I didn't have any friends or family or anything involved in that at the time, I felt like the justifications that were used at the time made sense.
Yep.
And then, you know, 2020 hindsight, they start to erode a little bit maybe.
Yep.
But yeah, it was a really interesting time to be part of the Defence Force, and I don't think you ever. Sorry, I don't think many people at that time joined the Defence Force and didn't want to go overseas. And this is probably I don't know whether it's a good analogy or not, but you don't join a football team to sit on the bench. And so when you do sit on the bench, it feels like you're missing out.
Yeah.
That I guess that's the best way I can kind of describe a lot of people's mentality and attitude towards it.
Makes sense. And, you know, the time was so volatile in the world. Like, obviously 9/11 was one thing, but there's just so much, there's chaos.
Yeah.
You know, there really was. So
yeah. And now though, if we ended up in a serious open conflict with Russia and with over the Ukraine type stuff that's going on, that would be a really different scenario, hugely different scenario.
Explain that to me.
So,
as in a technological saga, or
compared to Australia,
yeah,
Russia is huge. Ukraine is doing amazingly well to hold them off. Like, I don't think many people ever expected Ukraine to even last this long. But what they're doing, the way that they're fighting against Russia, and also a little bit of the support from the West has helped with the technology that's been sent over there.
Yep.
You know, like some of the drones and things that they've sent over are just creating this really massive mismatch in capability that the Russians just can't keep up with.
Wow.
And I think that's part of changing. It's changing the outcome of the war from what people thought.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, because quite literally, like it's like a bully with a lot of personnel taking on something like as the first day you look at it and go, wow, this is not going to end. This is going to end very quickly. Yeah. But we're February to now, and you know it's not stopping.
Yeah, I think
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard have taken over the news. Weirdly enough.
Yeah.
But like if you look in the proper news, it's not stopping. Ukraine's really in there, hey?
Yeah, and I'm following it closely, I guess, from a professional perspective because I still do work in sort of drones in defence, and keeping an eye on what's happening over there with those drones and that technology is actually very interesting to me because it's actually going to change how warfare happens. And people say that quite a bit, but we're actually seeing that now.
Yep.
And I think it'll change a lot of how countries decide to defend themselves. I think there might be a move away from certain big, conventional, expensive stuff to these smaller, more effective sort of technologies that
Yep.
I guess also reduce the amount of people that have to be exposed to risk.
Yep.
So, if you can send a drone and you lose a drone, it might be 10 grand worth of drone or something like that.
Yep.
I'm probably undershooting the numbers there, but versus a person's life, that's a hugely different equation.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting outcome of Ukraine, and that's why I follow that.
Yep.
Yeah.
The drone side of things is you're obviously involved professionally. We won't delve too far into that, but as a hobbyist as well as a consumer,
Yep.
you obviously pursue them a lot as well. You've got the brand new Mavic 3.
Yeah. Love
My
it.
poor speech then.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got like that as a consumer product.
Yeah.
Where does that sit in the world of performance of drones? Is that getting better?
Yes. So, and there's a lot of open source stuff on drones actually, and
Yep.
I think it's actually moving a lot quicker in that realm in the consumer industry. It's almost like the consumer industry is pushing along and developing faster than say the military based industry.
Yep.
In certain respects. So since I think it was almost 2000 and it was early 2000s that the Americans deployed like their Reaper drones. And, now you hear drone strike and you're like, okay, I get it. But back then they didn't really talk about it and that
Yep.
sort of stuff. It was really cutting edge. But now, fast forward, the military is looking at drones and they're watching very closely the consumer market because the consumer market's making really, really epic sort of growth or advances in autonomy and the quality of the cameras on them. Like the quality of the camera on the Mavic 3 that I've got, like that in Australian dollars is a $4,200 drone, like off the shelf. The camera equivalent that is carrying is like, I know, like the Sony that we were talking about, like that. It's got 4K. It's I think it's 10-bit color depth. Like the quality of the camera on that drone, and it flies, and it also can fly itself. So like the bang for your buck that they're providing, and that's the DJI, right? There's actually companies like Skydio, and they actually develop specifically for military, but they have consumer drones. And so I think it's the Skydio 2, and that drone has better autonomy or autonomous flying and tracking than the DJI, and almost as good a camera. So I think what we'll actually see is a whole bunch of more companies coming out and trying to compete in that space. I think DJI have made some really awesome advances, but I think they might be hitting that product maturity curve where they're sort of may not be advancing in certain areas as fast as other brands. So you might see a narrowing in on their specialty and that sort of stuff and what they can do. But like I'm looking at drones like the Skydio X2. That's a military specific drone, but I believe you can still get it off the shelf, but it's not cheap. Yeah. And it would be for a professional, but it has a thermal camera on it. It has the autonomous flight, and I think it can even operate in a GPS denied environment, so it doesn't need a GPS to fly itself.
Yep.
And so those sorts of things, like I'm looking at the quality of what you can do with that, and I was down actually in the Northern Rivers, yourself being from the Northern Rivers. The recent floods, I was thinking to myself, geez, imagine 100 or 1,000 of those drones flying around actually finding people and dropping supplies to them or doing those sorts of things. Like, we're going to see so many more advances in the near future, and I think looking at one of the biggest barriers being, I guess, regulation. CASA are very forward-leaning at the moment, but they've they're forward leaning in allowing drones, but they need to make sure it's safe. So part of what we're doing is also working with CASA, and it really helps when you see other drone companies like Wing, who are owned by Google, and they're operating out of Logan, and they're flying coffees to people. I don't know whether you've seen that.
I have, yeah.
They work with Extraction, actually, which is just around the corner,
Just up
I think.
here?
Yeah. Yep.
Really?
Yeah. So they were the first coffee provider.
Yep.
They don't actually, I don't think they fly from Extraction. They fly from like a warehouse,
Right.
but they have Extraction brewing on site.
Wow.
And they get a coffee to people in like 5 minutes.
Have you had one?
No, I haven't actually, because I live on the north side.
Yep.
They don't fly that far.
Some friends of ours did it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they live in the region. I think Browns Plains, and that was one of the areas that has it.
Yep.
And they're really lazy.
Yeah. Well, it's free delivery.
It's free.
Yeah. So at the moment,
Wow.
I believe still, last time I checked, it
Yep.
was free delivery. So
Wow.
it's actually pretty good. The cost, I think, of the coffee might be a little more than if you walked in the shop, but it's actually surprisingly cheap. Yeah.
Pretty amazing. We've all grown up watching the Jetsons and, watching all these things, and it's sort of getting there.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at these things and you're like, wow, we're sort of getting there with some of these things. And just as the pandemic sort of started, LSKD, Liskid
Yep.
Industries,
Yep.
they actually started doing parcel deliveries by drone for their clothing.
Oh, no way.
Obviously another Logan business as well,
Yep.
local business.
Yep.
I don't know if they're still doing it. It was just around, it got launched, they're building a new facility, there's so much action happening, and then obviously the world sort of changed a little bit with things. But yeah, they were doing clothing or lifestyle clothing deliveries with drones.
Wow.
That's pretty damn cool. So because they've got a loyal base too, like they're built around here,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we're going to see some changes, aren't we?
Yeah, and it's just about like making sure that, because the same as roads, right?
Yep.
Like everybody needs to know how to drive on the roads.
Yes.
So everybody who gets a drone needs to know how to fly without, putting people at risk and that sort of stuff. So that's about marrying up the two and making sure that, everyone's a responsible user. And like we're looking at the, I think it's 2032 Olympics in Brisbane.
Yep.
And there's been some subtle suggestions that there might be air taxis by then. So that might be something you may see in the next 10 years around Brisbane.
Because wasn't there a trial supposed to happen with Victoria? Do you know about that?
Good question. I don't know.
I believe there was some sort of trial that they were looking at running in Melbourne, where it was some sort of air taxi type service. Like, I guess it was like a drone, like it was a propelled device, like a drone propulsion system. But I don't know if it ever went ahead or if it's going ahead or consumer, obviously professional grade.
You know what, actually?
Do you know what it is?
It just clicked. I think it was Uber.
It was?
Yeah.
Are they doing something?
So apparently that was a marketing stunt by Uber, and they even got the Victorian government interested, and then they pulled the deal at the last minute. And
damn, because I looked at that, I'm like, wow,
big shame.
It looked pretty damn cool because they're talking 6 minutes from the airport to CBD.
Yep.
And as you've been to Melbourne, we've all been to Melbourne.
Oh yeah,
that would be a really nice facility to have, So I guess when you're saying about it for Brisbane, 2032 possibility,
Yeah.
We're going to talk about motorbikes and everything too. I'm just going to I've got to nerd out a little bit more about drones for a second.
Yeah.
Installation. You did an installation at Opera House. You're part of it.
So the Merrigan and Intel drone light show that we did.
Yes.
So that was a really, really cool event actually. And to be honest, it was a bit of a shame because timing wise, it was just as New South Wales and the rest of the country had opened up like properly.
Right.
And COVID numbers were pretty much running rampant.
Yep.
So a lot of people stayed away from the CBD and didn't get to see it, but it's getting a lot more airtime on social media now because people are actually like, that was really pretty crazy. And so we got approached by a production company in December last year, and they sort of said, can you do this? And we're like, yeah, probably, but we need to get all the approvals through CASA. We need to make sure everyone's qualified and know how to operate the system. So basically, the drones were from Intel, like the computer company, which not many people know, but they've built their own drones that can fly basically in what people call a swarm.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically 500 drones controlled from a laptop by about 2 or 3 people. So
wow,
yeah, and they're all choreographed, and they have like artistic directors and that sort of stuff. And basically, it was you talk about it and you go, oh yeah, that's nice, but then you get into the detail and there's so much in it. And basically, our team, Sue, who's our chief remote pilot, she's really good at what she does, and she managed to get CASA to approve it in I think it was 4 weeks, which is pretty good.
Especially in a place with high population, all those they're big factors.
Yeah. They had to get a restricted airspace put in.
Wow.
They had to stop the ferries over a certain period of time because all the ferries are coming into Circular Quay at the time. So they had to put I think it was a half hour or 45-minute block on the ferries for those times.
Yep.
And then they create a restricted air zone so that no helicopters or anything fly through it.
Yeah.
And it's it was between the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, and I went and saw it in person, and just seeing it in person it's next level. They're 3D moving images, and they look real. It's crazy. So
wow.
I think fireworks are forever ruined for me because now I've seen this.
Well, how are fireworks? When you look at it, they haven't changed ever.
No.
Fireworks have pretty much been the same sort of. They're awesome.
They are.
It's been the same thing forever.
Yeah.
That hasn't really modified too much. So it's going to be a change, and I guess that's done with a certain amount of AI, because you can't individually control 500 drones.
No.
I guess so. You've got to have a path that they all lead by or follow by, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they use a bit of that and a bit of kind of each other, so they know they do their position relative to each other as well as their position on a GPS piece. So it's basically the GPS is actually down to 10 centimeters accuracy, I think, or maybe even less. But you still see them slightly drift, but high wind, rain. Our guys flew in. They pushed the boundaries. They flew 5 shows over 5 nights.
Yep.
And each night was a challenge with the wind at the time, and they still managed to pull it off.
Wow.
Perfectly. So it was pretty interesting sort of test as well with that stuff in higher winds. Yep. Yeah.
Pretty interesting. I've got one more question about this, and when we'll move forward. I won't keep pressing you about this stuff.
Yeah.
But is it an interesting thing that the biggest consumer drone in the world, being a DJI, comes from where it comes from? Is that a challenge, as in military-wise, over time maybe?
I think there has been questions asked in the last 5 years or so about security, and I guess when you're operating a Chinese-made drone, and it's potentially taking pictures of military stuff, and it might be linked to a cloud database, which we can't verify where that is.
Yep.
That was questions that got asked. As far as I'm aware, people answered them sufficiently to the point where they were okay still using them. And so the Australian military still does use DJI, and as does the US military, even though the US Department of Defense did release a thing saying you kind of shouldn't years ago, and then they rescinded it. So, it's kind of, to be honest, it's a question that people are still asking and don't really know the exact answer to.
Wow.
But I won't say the West can't match what they do. The West, in terms of US or another country, could match what they do technologically, but we don't have the production facilities to make thousands, and also DJI have, as a brand, grown globally and done really good things. So their brand is known for doing good stuff with drones, right? So that would be a very hard sort of market to break into. That I would almost hazard a guess that they own about 80 to 90% of the drone market across the world. So
when you think of drone too, it's like action cameras. What do you think of with an action camera? It's a GoPro. There's other action cameras, but when you think of a drone now, you just think of a DJI. You don't even. It's a DJI. It's not even. Doesn't even go. There's other good products, but same with action camera. And what's the first thing that comes to your head? Oh, it's a GoPro. And they own that space, you know.
Yeah.
Interesting. Growing up in the Northern Rivers, mate. We'll move on from that. What was it like?
To be honest, I lived a pretty lucky life. Yep. We actually used to live in Lennox Head, and I was just near a beach called Boulders Beach, and I would run across some paddocks in the morning before school, go for a surf. Even one morning there was like dolphins in there, the sun's rising, and I was just like, this is awesome. Yeah. And so then I'd come home, have some brekkie and go to school. Like that was pretty good life. And I probably didn't appreciate it as much until I went and joined the army, and they sent me to the places that weren't so nice. Yeah.
Everyone describes it. Well, look how many people live there now. It's one of the best places in Australia, that whole region.
Oh, yeah. And unfortunately, there's a bit of a housing crisis around there, but I think that's mostly because it's such a desirable place to live. And, the floods that happened recently are absolutely devastating. Like, I went to Lismore and helped out, and, oh, man, the level of destruction, the streets were equivalent to some that I drove down in like Afghanistan. But to be honest, some streets in Afghanistan were much better than what I saw in Lismore. Like the amount of destruction there was just like 2-story high piles of just people's lives. Either side of the road, you're kind of like weaving between piles of stuff, and I feel for the people down there, and that's why I kind of took some time off work and went down and tried to help out, just because it seemed the right thing to do.
Yeah, and you touched on the rubbish part, and then the week later it come back again and washed all the rubbish away that was ready for pickup, and it's horrendous. We've got a really good family friend. I think I might have said this to you, but he's lived there his whole life, as have my family, on and off for a long time. And the 74 floods is the flood everyone talks about in the region of Lismore. Yeah. And he's a builder. He built his house a couple of meters, so it's like a 4-story house now. He's near the McDonald's in town, right? Built his house a couple of meters higher. The 2 middle stories are basically blank stories, because bottom you can store your vehicles, have chook pen and whatnot. Middle 2, don't put your personal belongings in there. The top's where you live. You just about need an oxygen mask to get to the top. Like it was a high place, Yeah. He got rescued off his roof.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of meters above the height.
That McDonald's is up high too.
It's a high one.
It's on
it flooded.
3 meter, 4 meter stilts or something.
Yeah, and it went through there. It's not going to be open for ages, I believe. And same with the shopping centre, the square just up the road.
Yeah.
You can't fathom it till you go.
Yeah, and even I had friends and family in Ballina, and some of those people aren't going to get back in their houses for a while, just because, and this is the thing about floods, is if the water even touches your gyprock, you pretty much got to rip all the gyprock off the walls, because there could be black mould inside there, and that'll poison you very quickly. So they're out of their houses for months, and like my mum's even got a friend staying for 6 months basically, because her house has to get ripped apart and rebuilt from the inside out.
Is this the most you've ever heard the term of mould being thrown around? For me it is, and I think what it's coming from too, because you and I both got friends, family down there. The moisture that's hung around.
Oh yeah.
We haven't had the sunlight to be able to dry things out. I got some friends that we're talking to them at the race meeting on the weekend, and they're out towards where the big prawn was.
Yep.
West Ballina, and there's still water in the house. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we're talking March to now, where there's still water in there. They haven't even got a chance to get in and rip it apart and do the things they need to do.
Yeah, and like we were incredibly lucky in Brisbane where we were.
Yep.
We were fine. But I've even noticed none of my doors close because they're all swollen from just the amount of humidity in the air and moisture. It's just everywhere.
Yep.
And I actually had some motorbike gloves in the garage, and I went down and had a look at them a week later, and they were just full of mould.
Really?
Yeah.
Just about to perish.
Yeah.
You know, they get to that sort of point. So, yeah, it's been a crazy. Like, we haven't had an autumn. That's one of the things. Like, I was in Lithgow last week, and I took a photo. Like, there was, you know, autumn trees, and we haven't had an autumn up here. It's been humid, rain. Like, it's just not. Yeah, it's strange times, mate. So.
Yeah, it's not good for riding bikes, that's for sure.
No.
We're looking at what next weekend. Well, we just had DGR cancelled last weekend, Distinguished Gentleman's Ride.
Yes. Yep.
And then we've got, not cancelled, postponed.
Dusthustle.
And Dusthustle coming up this weekend's been postponed, which is a real shame because we look forward to that event every year. It's the best.
Yeah, it is the best. And one thing I flicked to in a message straight away in the team, I was like, I really appreciated, obviously, the notice too. Like, they got the notice out to people like really, really early, and, you know, the forecast was for rain, obviously, this week. Hasn't been as bad as last week, but what they've had out there, like, you'd be crazy to even think about trying to put it on. It just wouldn't be the fun event that everyone's used to, I think, and destroy the facility.
Yeah, and I think poor old QMP have copped it with a lot of that rain.
That's 300 mil in 2 days.
Yeah, like they've got a lot of work ahead.
Yep.
You know, even 20 mil of rain will do you some trouble on a motocross park. So,
strange times.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a bit of sunshine and maybe getting out on the bike a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to try and G that up as we're talking about maybe this weekend.
Yeah.
Tell me about your old man building that BSA. That was obviously is that something that sparked an interest at the start in bikes, or you never even realised it at the time, or did you know it, or what?
Yeah, he always told me about it, and he always told me the story about how he built it himself. I actually. I just thought about Dad. I got a few photos when he passed away of him with his bike, and I was like, geez, he's so cool. I wish I could be that cool. At like 16, he's just like, I think he was 16, he rebuilt his own BSA from pretty much a pile of nothing because they didn't have a whole lot growing up.
Yep.
And he worked really hard to make sure that we did. And he basically told me this story that he couldn't afford a battery for it because he needed to replace a battery. And so he spoke to his dad, and his dad sort of said, yeah, I'll buy the battery for you, but I get first ride. And he was like, oh, like, okay, yeah, I suppose so.
Yep.
And so he's like worked away at this bike for like 12 months, I think. Finally got it running. Wasn't running. Got to the point he needed the battery. Got the battery, and got it running. And his old man's like, "Go on, mate." And he's like, "Oh, I thought you wanted first ride." He's like, "No, I was just messing with you." So he got his first ride, and he always told me about that as a memory that stuck in his mind. And he really enjoyed it. And I can't remember what happened to the bike. Because I was like, oh, geez, it would have been cool if you kept it.
Yeah.
But, you know, many years go on and you move houses and all that sort of stuff, so it's not like you can keep something like that. But, I sort of – it was probably just his interest in tinkering that really, really stuck with me, and I think also translated between bikes and cars and boats. And he even actually – built some high-performance racing aircraft at one stage.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got some photos of that he was just like so proud of what he had done. He built, it was like one of the old school rotary engines for aircraft where
Yep.
all the cylinders are around the outside.
Yeah, nice.
And they had like a test bed where they had a truck that they'd mounted on, and then they'd test the engine. And he said he'd gone through and like meticulously balanced this engine so much that you basically spun the prop, and he thought that the engine didn't have any compression.
Wow.
But it was just so perfectly balanced
Yep.
that it was just working perfectly. So yeah, he was pretty stoked with that. So yeah, that stuck with me, and I was always sitting on his toolbox, handing him probably the wrong spanner and the
Yep.
wrong Phillips head instead of a flathead. But
Yep.
you know that
They're the lessons, aren't they?
you learn those very early on, and it's actually interesting when you come to like somewhere like we've built with Skinnies, and I didn't realise how much I knew, but also how much I don't know. When you sit and talk to a mechanic about your bike, and they've got 15, 20 years worth of spanner time, geez, like they've probably forgotten more than I ever knew about bikes, you know. So it's really, I love being part of it because I'm learning as well. But, someone coming into bikes, brand new, fresh, probably never picked up a spanner, most of the time never picked up a spanner in their lives, and they want to learn about this thing, and they get some sort of sense of achievement out of it, which I do too, so I can understand that, and I want to bring them along on that journey. I think part of what initially sort of was a little bit intimidating, even as a guy coming into this motorcycling sort of area as an adult, I felt like I was just a bit of a noob, didn't know what I was doing. And there's all these big, tough, bikey kind of people. And, it was sort of hard to break into, I suppose.
Find your feet sort of deal.
Yeah, and a bit intimidating. So, like, I try and make sure that at Skinnies we're super welcoming, and everyone who comes through the door, I try and make sure I shake their hand and make them feel welcome, because it's that first 30 seconds where they'll decide whether this is a welcoming place or not. And I want people to feel like they can take that first step. Like, that's often, everybody says it's first step's the hardest, right? So, that's what I want to do, and I want to grow the motorcycling community. So,
it's an intriguing thing. Like you said, you probably came into bikes more as an adult. I came in, like, I've done it a long time, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't have
that.
the same feel of that.
Yeah.
So we come from two total different paths. But what I want to see is more people getting into riding. And there's got to be a door open for those people to get into riding. And I think that's a really nice door to have open, hey? Because working on them, man, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, it's real frustrating, but you do get a sense of achievement if you do something right.
Yeah.
You don't break a bolt off, or like, we've all done that stuff too. So there's got to be, you've got to have your wins along the way as well as riding it, and the win and working on it. So
yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I suppose having owned a bit of a basket case bike early on, I was spending a lot more time swinging spanners on it than I was riding. So actually getting out and riding in the last couple of years, because now I've got a newer bike that I can literally, throw a leg over and go down the road. That's changed a lot of what I do in bikes as well. And I think part of what we're also finding out with Skinnies is people come along and they might not necessarily want to even do the whole learning about how their bike works, all that sort of stuff. They might only want to know it in like a little bit of detail, but they're happy to pay someone to do it because they probably don't have the time, and that's fair enough. The other part that we're finding is the social side of it, where people just want to come along and they have a beer or a Coke or whatever they want to drink from the members' fridge, and just come and chat to people about bikes. And then a couple of I really like it when I see people who didn't know each other. They come to the garage, they meet, they start chatting, and then a couple of weeks later they're like, oh, we're going on a quick ride down here, or a couple of the guys, with the T7s that I mentioned earlier. They were just like, oh, we're just going to go down and go for a ride out off the gantry off Mount Mee.
Yep.
Go for a camp, have a bit of fun. And I was like, oh, awesome, that sounds great. I actually had a bit of FOMO because I had to do some stuff that weekend. But, I love seeing people come together and start learning that sort of stuff as well.
Yep.
and growing and riding more, because I think the more you do it, the more, it becomes part of your life and you understand it. And also, I think when people come into riding as beginners, if they don't have maybe the right people to ride with or the right people to guide them in riding, it can be a pretty dangerous time. And they can make some decisions which can ultimately be pretty bad for them. But I guess what we're trying to do is make that, be good role models where we can, make sure people are wearing safe gear, make sure people are making the right decisions on the road and understand the effect of, being safe on the road, or, the other side of that, being unsafe on the road, like pretty serious consequences on a bike. You don't have anything around you to stop you. So, your gear is basically all you've got, and that's not much.
No, it's not really.
No.
When you look at it, it's good gear.
Yeah.
If you've got the right gear.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And being a new person into bikes is such an influenced time. When I first got a road bike, I remember getting it and, I was 17, 18. At that time, you could get a 750 or 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had to get a 750 or 1,000. There's no correlation of going to get something else, but you're such an influenced time. Someone tells you, oh, you should probably maybe look at doing this. So that was a cool wheel stand. That was my ego that just got a good hit there. Let's have a go.
Yeah.
It's a position of influence getting that first bike on the road, and that's probably what you're dealing more with, people getting road bikes too within skinnies, I'm guessing, than dirt bikes. Or
we actually have a huge mix.
Bit of mix, okay, cool.
Yeah. We've got it's almost, I reckon, probably a 50-50 split with dirt bikes and road bikes.
Like registered dirt bikes or
both.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
so there's a lot of people. The adventure industry is big.
Yeah.
And, you would have seen, obviously BMW are killing it with their GS models over the last 10 years or so. Harley have just got the Pan Am.
Yep.
And that is obviously showing a market, right? And that's actually an interesting change and shift in Harley's sort of target market, I suppose.
Yes.
And obviously it's a big enough market that they think it's worth investing in building an entire bike for.
Big cost.
Yeah.
To develop something, isn't it?
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that is a pretty big industry, and that makes up a fair chunk of people at Skinnies.
Yep.
And also Skinny he's ridden both, on-road bikes and off-road bikes. As a mechanic, he's super talented. The amount of stuff he knows is ridiculous. But he also, for fun, rides dirt bikes. So he knows quite a lot, especially your DRZs and that sort of stuff. So he's very knowledgeable on those, and I think that translates into people saying, oh, well, he's good at that, then maybe I'll bring my bike in. And even his, traditional mechanical customers, I see a lot of DRZs, KTMs, Huskies, all that sort of stuff, off-road bikes there. But then, we see a couple of people riding track bikes. They actually bring their track bikes in to Skinnies, and one of the guys, Isaac, he had a Ducati Diavel, and he rode it off on the track. And so, actually, I don't think he wrote the Diavel off on the road. So he was like, you know what, I'm going to buy a Ninja track bike. Yep. And then he wrote the Ninja track bike off.
Oh, jeez.
And he's spent a couple of months now just rebuilding the thing from scratch at Skinnies. Comes in on a Saturday, works on it, and he's rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. And it's to be honest, he's getting really good value out of his membership because he's rebuilding an entire bike himself, basically. Doesn't have to pay it's probably like 100 hours worth of mechanic time or something ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
What we haven't done, and we should really preface this a bit, give us the pitch of Skinnies. We haven't really spoken about what Skinnies is, apart from Skinny as a mechanic. And obviously it's a social garage and things like that. But tell me more about what it actually is and what it came from.
All right, I'll start at the start, I suppose, because when I started getting into bikes, I made some really good friends like Denny and Curly, and I don't know whether you know Curly. Everybody seems to know Curly. And he's such a good bloke, and he knows heaps about bikes too. And so we always kind of chatted and went to events like Dusthustle together and made more friends. And we were actually rebuilding a little CT 110, but I think it has a pit bike motor in it, a little postie with a pit bike motor in it, and for Dusthustle a couple of years ago. And Curly had this mate, Skinny, and he brought us into the workshop and we managed to get the bike in and work on it. And so Skinny was, at the time, he was in Fortitude Valley, just in School Street there, and he had this quite small workshop that was about to be demolished, basically. So he had a 6-month lease on it, and he needed to move into something bigger. We just got chatting about that, and we were like, how good is it, just having a couple of mates working on a bike, having a chat, it feels good for the soul a little bit, I think, and just enjoying yourselves around, kind of an activity like building a bike together. So we sort of got chatting more about that, and we'd spoken about other businesses that we'd seen. So we're not obviously the first people that have done it. There's Rising Sun in Sydney, and then Custom Commune in Melbourne. And so we saw what they'd done, and they've kind of built quite different businesses, whereas where like Rising Sun they're in Newtown, they've got a restaurant there. They make the world's best ramen. I don't know whether you've ever heard that, but if you ever go to Sydney, stop in at Rising Sun and get some ramen there. It is top notch. Anyway, and they've got a workshop underneath. So the kind of the biggest difficulty is the rent. Having a space big enough to run a workshop out of and cover the rent. So I guess what we sort of looked at the models of what they'd done, and there was even actually a community garage in Brisbane back in, I think it was like 2015 maybe, and I think it was just, unfortunately, the timing wasn't there for the community to be big enough to support it. And so unfortunately it sort of, they pulled the pin, and I know the owners, they, I think, just had their own things that they wanted to go off and do. So it hadn't worked in Brisbane before. So we were like, all right, well, we need to make sure this is going to be something sustainable that isn't just going to show up and disappear in 2 years. And we're at 18 months now, so hopefully we make another 6 months. We'll see. But
that first tough 2 years, eh?
Oh, really tough. And we said, all right, we need to find somewhere big enough, relatively central enough too, so that people can come from all over Brisbane. It's not just a north side or south side or whatever. And we have people from out at Ipswich coming in because we didn't really realise that how much people wanted something like this, and it's a bit of the build it and they'll come sort of thing. But we found this place and we managed to get it in Bowen Hills, really nice spot. It's got a great sort of space, and we have even like a little parking alleyway right down the side, and it was pretty much a blank canvas too, with really high roofs. So we figured out, well, we can double the amount of space we've got here by just putting in a mezzanine floor. And we had a look at what that was going to cost, and we were like, oh, geez, that's going to be a bit of a hit straight up. So we managed to we managed to get a builder who's a mate of Skinny's, and so we were basically the labour, and then the builder was doing all the official sign-offs and all that sort of stuff. So we were in for like 4 months solid of nights and weekends, and even over Christmas, making that place what it is. So we were like lifting all the steel beams, welding the bench tops that we've got in there, and we were lucky to have some mates who were handy sparkies, and one of the guys is really handy with sheet metal. He's a sheet metal worker. He did the sheet metal on the bench tops. Oh, wow. So we managed to kind of like scrounge together this place and build it and start to make it a bit of a home. And like we've got really good members even that helped us out with furnishings and stuff, like Jock. He actually runs Kelpie Customs, which does motorbike parts and that sort of stuff, and really nice leather gear. And he just went out one weekend and grabbed a bunch of furniture and just went, here you go. And we're like, oh, thanks, mate. So, you know, it comes together in all those little pieces. And so, you know, even every weekend we're there now, we're still chipping away, trying to make the place better. It's really been from the ground up. But that was probably the world's worst pitch because it was super long. But I suppose just to give you like a really short elevator pitch style, we're just a community garage with space, tools, knowledge, and people to make people to give people the opportunity to build their own project bike, or just learn new skills, or be social and do the social side of bikes. So going on rides, going to events, and that sort of stuff. So we're talking to a couple of people at the moment, and we're even looking at running a motorbike movie premiere at the shop. So Garage Films, if you've heard of those guys, have reached out to us, and they want to use it because it's a workshop space, and it's actually, you know, a proper workshop space, not just a theatre that's dressed up to look like a workshop space. So we're really looking forward to doing events like that because it's all interlinked around bikes, and it's all about bringing people in, you know, getting the community to talk to each other, and you know, it can be cliquey at times in the motorcycle community. So I think we're very open in making sure that every person that joins the garage knows that we accept everybody, no matter what bike they ride, who they are, whatever. Everybody's welcome. And I think if I was just to distill it down to that, that's the one thing that people seem to really like about Skinnies, is that anybody's welcome. And as long as you ride a bike, and even if you don't.
Bring your car.
It's
interesting. I went obviously to the market day. That was my first time obviously to it, to the store, and man, there's a crowd. We had a lot of people coming through.
My best guess was about 250 to 300 people that day, which was pretty good by our standards.
Especially on the day. It was another day like we're having at the moment outside, and it was good. Very, very good.
Thanks. So. We were pretty lucky, and we actually had a lot of work done by, we've got a committee. And they're basically just volunteering their time because they believe in the garage, and I love that. But it's awesome that people want to donate their time to trying to make, you know, the garage better and grow and that sort of stuff. So the amount of work that they did to pull that off, I think, is what showed when you came along and saw how many people were there. It was really good for the garage, and we're going to try and run that every once a quarter, I think. I think everybody needs a little bit of a rest at the moment, though, so we're pushing the next one back to the later half of the year.
Good idea.
Because we also don't want it to get rained out as well, and there's a lot of motorbike events already piled into this part of the year. So, we're just trying to make it a weekend that people will be like, oh, I've got a free weekend and there's this really awesome event on, and come along.
Let's go in there.
How
does it grow further? What do you see?
I think we get a lot of interest in workshops and learning skills. So, we run day to day. A member can come in and book a hoist and work on their bike for 4 hours, or if it's a Saturday, 8 hours or whatever. But we've got welders, we've got a lathe, we've got all these really awesome tools and machinery that takes time for people to get good at. And also, if you're just practicing on your own, it takes you a lot longer than if, say, you've got a professional teaching you.
Yep.
And we're lucky that we've got friends like Kip and those sorts of guys, like Keely, who does...
Works here.
Yeah, actually.
He's downstairs here today.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, he was yesterday. I'm sure he's here today.
Yeah, Keely Pritchard.
Keely Pritchard, obviously.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've got some really talented fabricators who have these skills and they love teaching people.
Yep.
And so Keely came and did a really quick how to basically do your own stainless exhaust on a bike. And it was impressive watching him work. Like he tacked up a motorbike exhaust in probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, I reckon, and he made it look easy.
Yeah.
Even when the foot peg was not on the bike, and he realised after he'd already tigged something up.
Yep.
So. That was a bit of a curveball for him, that he had to like cut it back off and like redo the angle of the whole bottom part of the exhaust. Managed to smash it out, and the man is just good at what he does.
He's a master.
And then, to the other sort of talented people like Kip that we've got, and he does Porsche bodies as his daily job. And he's over at McKernan Restoration.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And he is an absolute jet when it comes to shaping metal. That man is a genius. And so we've got people like that, and they are keen to give their time to teach people these crafts that are probably, they're starting. There's not many people these days that can do that sort of stuff. So it's keeping alive some of those skills, hopefully, but also people are keen to learn that and do it on their own bike. So
sure.
we're structuring some sort of anything from basic maintenance on how to keep your bike on the road, through to welding, through to maybe shaping a side cover or a fender or something like that for your bike, all the way up to, if you really want to, make your own fuel tank. So, yeah, for those that...
Would you like to have a go at that?
I would do a squarish fuel tank. I don't know about rounded. I'm better with making the machines do the work for me.
Yeah, bring some automation into the workshop. Yeah, it's a dream.
Yeah,
that they're the skills that are, they're like I don't know, they're hard to come by. Hard to come by trades. So interesting to see how it goes over the next few years. So where are you at with obviously goals and where you're at to now, like 18 months in? Where are you at? So
we've got about 85 members at the moment. My goal for Skinnies is to get to 110. 110 members, and that's a mix because there's 3 different membership levels. You've got like your social, and we kind of say that's here for the beer and the chat, because we've got, luckily, Curly from Young Henry's and Kempy, they keep the beer, they keep the fridge full of beer, and also soft drinks and non-alcoholic beer if that's what you're interested in. And then we've got the servicing membership, which is kind of people who want to do servicing level work on their bikes. So chain lubes, you can change your tyres, you can... just basically pull pieces off your bike, put the pieces back on, that sort of work. And then we've got fabrication. So fabrication is the people who are like, I want to shape the guards, I want to cut the back subframe and weld this and do that and get something engineered. And, we've had some people build some pretty impressive stuff. Like one of the guys built a sidecar for a DRZ and completely legal. Like he did it
Yep.
all the proper way, and he rode that out to Cameron's Corner, up to the Cape and back, and it was fine.
Wow.
Yeah. So like those sort of wacky contraptions, like I love seeing people do that and take it from what's in their head onto something that actually works. I love that.
Yes.
And so that's what I really love about the garage and what people can do.
What's been a good day in the garage? That's a proud day to see something like that achieve, from thought process, creative idea to going out to there and back. What other things have been a good day? Marketplace is a damn good day. Obviously, that's a proud thing.
The moto market was great to see how many people came.
Yeah. Book them, they'll come.
Yep.
That sort of deal.
Yep.
What other things have been those days where you go, we've actually built something here?
So Mind Moto was a really, really good example of that. And it wasn't necessarily, it was really good while the program's running, but the time that I felt it the most personally was when I actually got to interview one of the participants afterwards, and some of the stuff that he said, I guess I should just pedal back a bit, but
tell us what that actually is.
Yeah. So Mind Moto is a DGR initiative or DGR funded initiative, and the actual concept for Mind Moto was done by Jeff Goff, and he's the guy. He's like the loveliest guy, and he's been running the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride since its beginning in Brisbane, 9 years, I think. This was his first year that he's sort of taken a step back, but he's still involved.
Yep.
But he has a psychological kind of background in his work and that sort of stuff. So he managed to come up with this concept where it's similar. It really kind of is similar to what Skinnies is about, and it's using motorbikes as a tool to help people through problems or understand problems or provide context to, I guess, using analogies to motorbikes and bringing those across to help them understand how the mind works. And so the easiest way to kind of explain that is like shock absorbers. And so Jeff had like a 12-week program, and each week was about a different topic. Mm-hmm. One of those topics, and the easiest to explain in a short period of time, is shock absorbers. So, you've got your suspension on a bike. If that's not set up right, it makes a world of difference. And especially like, let's say off-road, when you're taking on heaps of bumps, you need softer suspension, things to absorb those bumps. And that is the same in life. Mm-hmm. When you experience these shocks in life, you need to absorb those somehow. So if you are just kind of super hard, stiff as a board, think you can handle everything on your own, odds are at some point you're going to get hit with a bump that you're not going to be ready for. Yep. And if you haven't got those built-in shock absorbers, those tools in life, then it's probably going to send you for six. So the idea of Mind Moto is to give people those skills and try and use like analogies like that that make sense to them. Another one was carbies. You're constantly, let's say you've got an old Honda, right, and it's got 4 carbies, and you're tuning. You're constantly, you get one carby right, and then the other 3 are out of whack. Yep. So you've got to work through and just constantly tweak. Yep. And basically, that's kind of what you've got to do with a lot of your mental state. You've got to constantly tweak to stay at a high-performing level, or even just a normal performing level. And I think people are starting to understand that, but there's a lot of people talking about it, but I don't think there's a lot of people who are absorbing just exactly what that means. That kind of means that working on your mental health is, you should be doing it just as often as you go to the gym and work on your physical health. Yep. So that's kind of part of what we were trying to reach out and get people just through the door, to talk about, and that's what Mind Moto was. And it was targeted at a specific age bracket of men, and that's for a number of reasons. But one of them was that they're an identified at-risk category, especially in motorcyclists. So I think it's just about upbringing and environment and all that sort of stuff, that they are the most at risk of taking their own lives, or being involved in a serious accident on a motorbike that they lose their life. And it's an unfortunate fact that's backed up by the data. So the intent was to focus in on that group for this Mind Moto activity.
What's the age?
I think it was
Roughly?
maybe mid-30s to late 40s.
Okay.
Or it might have been even 39 to 49 maybe.
Okay, yep. Somewhere in that middle-aged, I guess you say. Yeah.
Yep. And it wasn't exactly who you'd straight away assume. Like, a lot of people are probably like, 20-year-olds that get on a bike. And it's actually not that, because it's not the stats also aren't just bikes. They're also men in general, and so the idea was that at least we could try and narrow in on that group and start to make a difference. And from the feedback that we got, there was a lot of blokes that provided us amazing feedback. But the best feedback I got was from this one bloke, and he just sort of said, the difference my wife has noticed in me from the start to the finish is astounding. Like, he couldn't believe that going to a workshop on a Tuesday night and listening about these things would change his life. But he dead set swore to me it's changed his life. And I took heaps of pride in being one small part of that. I think the program that Jeff has made is that, like, the credit has to go to Jeff here. He's made an unreal program, and the fact that they felt comfortable coming into a workshop, they sort of expressed that, going into a doctor's office is really clinical and it's pretty intimidating for a bloke, for anyone really, because if you're in there and you think, oh geez, what's going to happen now? But you go into a workshop and you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of familiar. You sit down, you have a chat to some people about bikes, and then the sort of teaching starts, and they're talking about motorbikes, and then at the tail end of that, they kind of nicely sort of segue into psychological tools and all that sort of stuff. So that program is unreal, and I'm really hoping that continues, because the change that it made in the 30 or so people's lives that attended was, from the feedback we got was, really, really good.
That's a huge moment for the shop.
Huge, yeah. And I don't know, like, it's not like grandiose or anything like that. I think some of the best wins that you get out of life are small but really important. Yeah, so that's why that's one reason I sort of really wanted to kick off Skinny's Garage, because in 2018 I lost a really good friend of mine, and that affected me hugely, and without some of the people in my life, like my really supportive partner and friends, I would have really struggled through that. And I did struggle, but it wasn't something that led me to a really, really dark place. So that, I guess what I wanted to do was try and, for people who might not have that, provide that as well, even if it's literally just, you're like, oh, I need to get out and clear my head and maybe stop the cycle of thoughts that I'm having, an excuse to come down and have a chat and, talk about bikes and clear your head, that sort of stuff. Because, some alternatives that I see people talk about, maybe going off and going on their bike and just being a bit reckless, I think that's probably the worst thing you could do, especially if you're distracted and frustrated or angry or sad, that sort of stuff. There's a level of, I guess, catharsis when you can just focus on the road and focus on what you're doing and do that. But if you're distracted, it's the wrong thing for you. So I guess that's part of what we wanted with people, to be able to come to Skinnies and have another option.
I think, judging by your email address you sent me the other day, we're pretty close in age, within a couple of years.
Yep.
The last digits of the birth date, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So we're 3 years apart in birth dates, and I don't know about your relationship with your dad that you had and where you grew up, but I look at my dad, right, where we grew up in Ballina, and I look at my generation. There's two total different things, and I know I speak to a couple of guys around the industry, bike industry and stuff as well, and I always remember as a kid, Dad going over to the bike shop Friday night, and I was there as well. We're building race bikes, and the people were getting ready to race that owned the store. That was Seaside Motorcycles in Ballina. I lived next door to that shop.
Oh, awesome!
Which was a great place as a motorcyclist to grow up, next door to a shop. But I look at things like that, and I look at my own network of people, and we don't do that through the week. None of us. So, like, I look at Dad. Dad would always be over there on a Friday afternoon or whatever, and helping guys with their bike builds, loading them up into the trailer with the mates, and having that outlet. There was drinks. There was all the things that, especially in the 80s and 90s, there was a party as well, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was obviously something to it. Worked hard forever, but there was a Friday where you could do that, and all the kids were around, and we were all doing our own thing. But my group of age group, which is your group of age group, without things like what you're doing there, we don't do it. We go home, we lock the door with our families, which is a great thing. Everyone needs to do that too, but there's got to be a me time. It's selfish to say that. Well, that's what it's turned into, people saying it's selfish to say, but sometimes you've got to be selfish. And I think it's not even that. It's just you've got to do it. And that's something I see what you're doing. Like coming this midweek, you get to catch up with your friends and do that, plus learn skills. The shop that Dad went to, they didn't have the skills of that. It was just a group of mates. And we don't have the knowledge that we have today, and we should be using that knowledge. And that's what you guys are doing. And it's, quite easily to get into your routine of going home and switching this off and shutting the door. And that shouldn't happen. Big time. And that's actually a really good point that I probably didn't. I've never really considered that for our generation. Right.
It's probably a bit of a maybe that's what some people recognise in themselves, that they need a bit of that socialisation.
For sure.
And my old man used to go and catch up with his mates at the pub maybe, and that sort of stuff, and probably less beneficial than going down a bike shop and, doing learning stuff. But just the conversations you have as well, even if you're not officially learning from someone, that just conversing back and forth, you pick up so much.
You do, and that's the thing that is such a miss. It's the real relationships, and you hear people talking about their doors now, like the fear of someone knocking on your door. Oh gee. Whereas in the past, I've got visitors. This is awesome. It's like you better call me before you walk to the door. That's how we've turned into.
Yeah, good point.
And it closes your relationships down, and you've got more time to dwell and sit at home. I don't know. I don't like that too much, and I see it very much around. And I appreciate what you're doing with that.
Thanks. Yeah. I think humans seem to naturally seek comfort.
Yeah.
So, sitting on the couch is comfortable, but it's probably not going to help grow your personality or you as a person as much as maybe getting outside and trying to learn some things, or that sort of stuff. So I think it's a really good point that you're hitting on.
Yeah, cool. I don't know. I hope it made sense.
And we totally meant that with Skinnies.
I hope it made sense, because it is something I had thought about. I was like, man, I always looked at that, and like I never thought of it at the time. I just thought Dad was over there, but there's a way of it too. There's a vent. There's it was good for us kids. We were all out riding push bikes around a bike shop and all that stuff. It was awesome. But at the same time, like it's missed. It's really missed now. And you just 5 o'clock comes around, you see the people. the head gets into the phone, the door's locked at the shop or whatever they're doing, and straight home to whatever it is. And you don't get that time to socialise anymore. And then the Saturday comes around, you've got kids' sports or this and that. Same deal, that's disappeared. And as a kid growing up, all the families went to kids' sports. Even now, it's you take your kid to the kids' sport.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might be very judgy on that, but that's just something I see. And I don't have kids, so maybe I just look at it at a different perspective. I'm not sure.
No, I think you're right though. I think it does definitely relate to how easy it is to pick up a phone and be social, but in a different way, and maybe less constructive way. I don't know.
Like bubble social, hey?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I really. It's funny how often I think to myself, oh geez, I'm tired. You know, I'm in at the garage a couple of nights a week and maybe a weekend or on a Saturday, and sometimes I'm just like, geez, I'm tired. I can't be buggered to go down there. And then I get down there and it's just like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Why did I think that? I don't even know why, because I get down there and just get so much energy from the people there, and you get to hear about their lives, and it's really funny. We've got a really different different types of people. Like we've got people who are welders, fabricators during their day job, all the way through to people who design software. Town planners. One guy actually was a town planner, and I didn't know this until like a week ago, and he's like, oh, sorry, I've been a bit off the grid, like I haven't come into the shop for a bit. And I was like, yeah, what have you been doing? And he's like, oh, I bought a Jim's mowing. I just thought I'd have a crack at that.
Seriously?
So, yeah. And he's apparently doing really well, but just as all small business owners are, just consumed, right? Trying to make it successful. So, he's like, no, I've decided I've got to, draw a line in the sand, turn myself off at some point, off the clock, and come in and just enjoy myself at the garage. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's the first thing that you want to do after work is come and enjoy.
Do more work.
Yeah.
That's good though, isn't it?
Yeah. And to be honest, like he might not actually come and bring his bike in that often. He just comes and grabs a beer and has a chat to people.
That's cool.
Yeah. Spends half an hour just watching someone, or like we've got a bunch of members, like one of the members, Vic, and he's in his 70s, and he still rides. He actually came on an overnighter with us the other weekend. Yep. We had 50-50 men and women on that ride, and then the age range was about 50 years between the youngest and the oldest.
Wow.
So, yeah, really broad range of people, and that is really what we get there, which is I love that.
Yep.
And Vic just comes in on a Wednesday, cracks a cider, and then walks around and just says, what are you doing there? And, like, the wealth of knowledge that he's got, he's a bit of a BMW K series fanatic. Yep. So he's rebuilt a bunch of those bikes. And so someone comes in with a Beamer and an old one at that, and he's sort of like, oh, yeah, this and that, and just starts to, subtly point out things, and they're like, oh, geez, there's a bit of knowledge I can, soak up here. So, and it's not just on Beamers, it's he'll just say, oh, how does that work and how does this work? And if, like, I've been caught out and I'm like, I feel like I need to explain it to him, but he knows.
Yep.
But he's asking you to sort of, so he can sort of do a bit of subtle teaching as well. So, yeah, there's those sorts of folks that come around the garage too. Yeah.
What's he ride?
He rides, actually, he had an old, I think he has an old Panhead Harley.
Oh, true.
Yeah. And then I think it was a Panhead. And then he's got a K100, I think. He's got a couple of BMW K bikes. He's actually just finished rebuilding one from scratch. And and he hasn't shown anyone, so he's going to do a reveal at some stage at the garage.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of like the cool stuff that we like to do. Is like he's like, oh, do you mind if one night at the garage we do a bit of a funky reveal and then I do a bit of a presentation? I was like, mate, that'd be great. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're going to do that. Hopefully, I think we're penciling it in for late June.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Those bikes like that, like the R series or the K series BMs and stuff, the guys and girls that have got into those over the years are in.
Yeah.
Like they're right in.
Yeah.
We've got one in our riding group.
Bikes.
Colt bikes. Yeah, exactly right. We've got one in our riding group that he worked at. He did his apprenticeship at BMW in Sydney Motorcycle in the late 70s, early 80s. So worked through all those bikes, and he had his 50th about. Must have been about 6 or 8 years ago. And one of his mates that he did his apprenticeship with, his gift for his 50th was one of the original R series toolkits. Because they had some special tools for him and stuff as well. He goes here and from being 18 to 50 or whatever, and getting this gift that when you're doing your apprenticeship and that you're working hard, there's a lot of good memories. And he's like, man, that's the best, because he's still got some of those bikes too. Yeah, that's the best gift I could ever get. I thought that was really neat, because they're Colt bikes. You're right. You know?
Yeah. I don't reckon there'd be. You'd be lucky if there was a bike that was built in the 60s that still has its original toolkit with it.
Gone. Oh, yeah.
Good luck if you find one of those.
Absolutely. Tell me about your bikes now. Like we've. You had the 69. You've still got that. Yep,
still got it. I'm actually piecing that together. I've got. I've done more in the last month than I have in the last 6 years. So I got some new spokes from Ash's Spoke Wheels. God, those guys are unreal.
Absolutely.
Like the difference a brand new set of spokes will make to a 60-year-old set of wheels is outstanding. And so I've re-spoked the wheels, never done it before in my life, and had Skinny sort of give me a bit of a coaching session on how to build your own wheel from scratch.
How'd you go?
You know what? Everybody said I'd be pulling my hair out, and there were some stages where I was like, "Yep, this is tedious, and really frustrating." But it wasn't as bad as what I thought it would be in my head, and I think it was two things: the right tools and the right advice. Because I there's inside and outside spokes, and then some wheels aren't symmetrical. So if you cross up the actual wheel rim and get it wrong, you find you've just got to do another 50 spokes again, basically.
Torture.
Yeah, which is a bit frustrating, but it's when you get told the right technique from scratch, makes your life so much better.
So they're all good?
Yeah. They came up and I put it on the truing stand and gave it a bit of a spin. You've got this little needle that kind of shows you how much the wheel wobbles away from the needle. So you tighten it to get it just basically consistently flying past that needle. And it was moving about a millimetre. And even Keely Pritchard I had a chat to, and he's like, geez, mate, like those wheels are so unreliable. You're lucky you even got it that good.
Wow.
I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, like there's points where they welded certain rims and they weren't like pressed or anything. They were actually like made from a piece and then joined together. And he said like often those parts are just like, it's almost like a buckle on its own. It's a
factory buckle.
Bit of a weak spot.
Wow.
So it was good to be able to get those together, and I'm going to get some rubber on them and
probably
sort
more
of
balanced than the factory.
Yeah. I wouldn't give myself that much of a pat on the back, I don't think. But
what rubber are you going to put on?
I like to do things a little bit differently, so I'm going to go, and I love a scrambler, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So I actually am going to put some knobbies on it, but I'll probably go with some trials tyres.
Cool.
But I've actually got Skinny looking for me at the moment, because the tyres at the moment are a bit hard to get with all the petrol issues, and because that's apparently used in part of the manufacturing process, there's a shortage in a lot of tyres. And if you can get them, they're not cheap. So I'm just looking at almost there was an Avon Trials tyre that you could get, and it's knobby, but it's not ridiculously knobby. So it's, pardon me, it's a bit better for on and off road because I'm pretty honest with myself. It's not going to do a whole lot of off road Ks, but I want it to at least be able to do some.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rebuilding it to be a really nice shop bike that also gets ridden. So
awesome.
We'll see, but it's coming together, and I've got the pieces sort of the puzzle coming back together, and
lovely.
Yeah.
What's have you got a goal time for next year or what?
End of this year.
This year,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I actually might even stretch to trying to get it running by the Mick doing Dusthustle.
I was going to ask you about Dusthustle. I was like, I wonder if you will, but
I might flat track it, but I don't think I'll Q&P. I wouldn't be jumping it, that's for sure.
For sure. That's cool. That's a cool bike. Colour?
I'm still tossing up. I'm thinking lighter colours, and I actually saw some really nice Hello engine builds. There's a guy in the States. He's in Bike XF a couple of times, but he's done some really nice kind of scrambler builds and kind of like unique period type builds. I kind of like a really light blue almost, something like that. But to be honest, haven't locked it in yet, so we might see some funky stuff come out.
Cool.
Yeah. I like to push the boundaries, and there was a really talented builder actually, Francis von Tudo, and he used to work with Skinny, and he's gone back to Italy now, but if you've ever seen, he got a couple of builds in Bike XF, and the builds he did were just outrageous, like ridiculous, but they were so good because he pushed the boundaries on a lot of things. And I think they were kind of those builds that like people see and go, oh, I don't know about that, but then they're like before their time a little bit. So I really loved his style, so I'm trying to maybe follow in his footsteps a little bit there and put a little bit of that flavour on it, because he's bold. He's a really good guy, and he sort of taught me a lot of things along the way. So he
was working out at Benyo, wasn't he? I think he had a shed at Benyo or something.
Yeah, he moved around a bit.
He did?
Yeah, so he ended up actually just before he moved back to Italy, he was in this tiny little workshop in Fortitude Valley with Skinny.
Wow.
And that was where I already knew him, but that was kind of where we spent a lot of time there, and then also in the new workshop just before he took off, because he was around for a few months.
Wow.
Yeah.
His builds were different. I definitely remember seeing the name pop up in the bikes, and yeah. Oh, that's exciting. And your road bike, you've got a 1200 Scrambler? Yeah,
the Triumph Scrambler 1200, the XE.
What made you go to that?
I do love a good Triumph, and their latest sort of modern classic or retro classic, whatever you want to call it, builds. I love the look of them. I love the kind of old school, pretty bare bones look to it. No fairings, and I also kind of thought to myself, I just started riding a little bit of dirt at the time, and I thought, you know what? I think I want a bike that I'm not limited by what road surface is. So I can go and just ride tarmac and then be like, oh yeah, flick a few buttons and go off road. So I do love that. I have a little bit of a problem at the moment though. The frame's broken.
What?
Yeah, so just in front of the kickstand. Yeah, I was a bit upset by that, but then, I haven't been kind to it.
No, you've done the things that you should do with it, but wow.
Yeah, and when I say unkind, I just mean like I've kind of maybe gone off road a fair bit and gone maybe off a few bumps that weren't necessarily just bumps. And so like it's a heavy bike. It's from stock. It's like 230 kilos wet. So it's not a light bike to be getting air and then landing.
So what do you do? What happens there?
Triumph are really good. They're covering under warranty. So I spoke to Oliver's and they sort of said, your warranty is still in effect, and that sounds like something that'll get covered, because I actually don't think it was from the riding. It's actually been on the stand, because it broke right near the stand, and there's a few sort of people that I've spoke to that have had the similar issue. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but I think it's good that they're standing by the bike and replacing it, which is great.
Man, that's I hadn't heard obviously that happen with that, but you've loved it, the whole time.
Oh,
generally.
Oh my God, that bike is so good.
Tell me a good day on that. What's been a good day?
Well, we had actually recently, my partner and I, Bagheera, I'm really lucky. She loves bikes.
What's she ride?
She rides a street twin, actually, Triumph as well. Because at the time when I bought my bike, she was looking to upgrade because she had a Suzuki TU 250 before that, and it was a good bike, but she hits highways, and she was a good gust of wind would almost knock you off that thing. And so she's always liked the similar style bikes to me as well. And she liked the street twin. So we sort of got those bikes around similar times. And she loves it. She actually rides more Ks than me because she commutes to work. She works at QUT at Gardens Point there, so she commutes to work on her bike like a couple of times a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So a good day on our bikes. We actually went for Easter. We took a bit of time off, and we, the country's been hit pretty hard by the last couple of years, so we've been trying to head in west and just sort of explore some of the areas, and you find these tiny little communities, and at least stop in and buy some fuel, get some coffee, and do whatever you can there to try and inject something into the community, even if it's little. But also it's just parts of Queensland I've never seen before, and we kind of went out to we went up to this place actually called Back to the Bush, and it was basically a farm stay, and there was about 7 or 8 people staying there at the time, and we rocked up on the bikes, long day. We actually went up through Jimna and went off road from there, and then so we rock up at the end of the day, absolutely tired, and the host was like, the entertainment's about to start, and I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, have a look, and it's this like Elvis impersonator, and he's just like singing and probably hitting about 50% of the notes.
Oh, no.
And so I just that was the funniest time, because you don't plan those things, but you go out and have these experiences you would never have expected to have had. And that's what I love about getting out on a bike, that sort of stuff. And you find some absolutely awesome stretches of road where it's just these twisties, there's no one there, and you just go a couple of laps,
Nothing like it, hey?
Oh, it's unreal, yeah. So, I really enjoyed that, and I managed to get some really nice drone footage and bike footage, so I'm kind of whacking together a bit of a video, that sort of stuff that I'll hopefully share soon.
Tell me about that. You've created your own YouTube channel with bikes, drones, the things you're into. How's that going?
To be honest, not as good as I would like, but I am my own harshest critic, which you probably understand. Yeah, definitely. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of kind of courage to put yourself out there and have people watching what you've done and potentially tearing it apart.
Yeah.
It's, geez. Some of the comments you get and you don't expect, you're like, that hits home a bit hard. But then you've also got to think they don't know you as a person potentially either. And also, if they're providing constructive criticism, maybe I can be better next time. So I suppose all those things considered, I don't put out as much videos as I would like. And then on top of that, I've had 2 hard drives die in the last 6 months with like collectively almost 9 gigabytes of footage that I could not recover. So unfortunately, I had about 5 or 6 videos I was going to make, and they're gone.
What hard drive?
One was lacy.
Yeah, right.
Not a cheap hard drive.
In one of the orange case
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
Jeez.
Yes.
Very rare.
Yep. There's that one, which they have a warranty. You get a new hard drive, but you don't get any of the data back.
Did you try a recovery system?
Yeah.
No go.
No good. They actually have, with Lacy as well, free recovery as part of the hard drive, and that was one reason I bought it, but they couldn't get anything off it. And then the second one was, I think it was I can't remember, it was a Western Digital.
Yeah.
And it was 2 months old. And the guy said to me at the local data recovery place, "What are you doing to these hard drives?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just put stuff on, movies on them, and then they die." So it's a bit disappointing, but I guess, like, those challenges aside, I get a real kick out of the creative aspect.
Yep.
And it's not a fast process for me to create those films, because, like, I've been editing stuff probably over 10 years now.
Yep.
Probably even 13 or 14 years, and that includes, like, really basic GoPro 1 maybe footage that you're like, oh, what do I do with this?
Put a transition in.
Yeah.
You're like, what do I do with this?
Put a weird flip transition or something weird into it.
Swirl or something in this. Bit of hypercolour.
Exactly right. So, that's a long time ago, but I took a year off the military and I went and lived in Canada. Mm-hmm. And that was where I started to get semi-serious about video editing. And I got some GoPro footage and slapped it all together and made this video. And there was a local video comp. It was part of the Banff Mountain Film Festival, if you've heard of that.
Absolutely.
I go there every year. They're the best videos.
Yep.
Like, so inspiring.
Yeah.
It makes me want to get outside and do stuff.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So it wasn't actually the big part of that. It was kind of like a side segment of it, and they were throwing videos in. I actually made, like, top 3. Wow. And I was like, "Whoa, okay, this is all right." And I think I got 3rd. So I was pretty stoked with that. And then I came back to Lennox, and I had a couple of months just before I went back to the army.
Yep.
And I was looking for a job, and I saw this, like, ad pop up on, I can't even remember what it was. It might have even been, I can't even remember, Craigslist was a thing back then in Australia, but it might have been Craigslist or a forum of some kind. And I applied for this job, and it was video editing for a skydiving company.
Yep.
And they were in, they were called Skydive the Beach Byron Bay, but they were actually in Ballina at the Kingsford Smith Ovals.
Oh, true.
Yeah, so they used to fly out of Ballina Airport, fly sort of over Lennox and that sort of area, and then jump over Ballina and land on that football field. And so I was one of the editors, and I would come in, and the lady, her husband was running the skydiving part, but she had experience working for Red Bull, and so she knew heaps about the process and how to structure everything. And so I learned so much about the process of video editing there that, like, we structured the shots to the point where they would come in and I could just drag and drop shots straight into sections of video, and I could edit a video in 10 minutes end to end, and it was a 3-minute video. And so you would just cut the start and end of each little clip, bring the audio up and down in the right sections, and then top and tail it with, some branding, and then you've got a video. But, like, these days, when you're trying to be creative, it's a whole different process, really, because you don't have the shots that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, that's a production studio level thing. But if you're trying to be creative and make something a little different, you've kind of got to, like, throw something in there, see how it goes, go, nah, that doesn't work, chop that out, maybe go back out, shoot some more footage, come back. It's a real process. So yeah, like your level of production that you do in a day, obviously the planning that it takes to be able to piece something together, because you potentially can't go back out and reshoot that. It's pretty impressive.
That's scary.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're talking hard drives and stuff, it's real scary. You
Yeah.
know, like, it's one of those things. It's a risky thing. It's a risky business, you know, because you're indebted to people. It's why I won't shoot weddings, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fair enough. Like, people who shoot weddings have to pretty much pay for twice the amount of equipment and things because they need a backup of a backup.
Absolutely.
And so, because
It's too much emotion
one
too.
person's special day and you lose that,
It's not worth it.
I wouldn't want to be that guy.
Nah, it's not worth it. It's hard enough with a race team. Like, there's a lot of pressure on doing the stuff with the teams and stuff, and making sure you get enough throughout the weekend and that. And to have the fear of that happening, let alone being that emotional day of that one day. I've had 5 or 6 offers to go do it, and the money's okay, but that doesn't mean anything compared to the harassment that you can get online. You know,
Oh, yeah.
It's just not worth it. You know, so yeah, money's not every measurable concept, is it? You know,
No.
It certainly helps some things, but doesn't measure the stress that comes with it. You know?
Yeah, and the job satisfaction.
Yeah.
From that, I suppose, like just nailing the shots and, you know, piecing something together that people come back to you and say, oh, that was really good. Like, that gave me these feelings and that sort of stuff. And I love doing that. And that's kind of why I do that as like a little side hobby, I suppose.
It's a huge part to it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And being creative is fun. Like, it's not something, I think, it's like you try and hide it forever. I think you get in that literal world where you're trying to do the normal things you're supposed to do in life, but to be creative, you sort of put it to the side, or you don't act on it sometimes. And it's really nice to actually do it and put something together and look back and go, gee, that worked out really well, because it's like a builder, I guess, that sits back and look at a house they've just built from a plan or made a plan up. There's a lot that goes into that. You come back and go, man, I really. Usually not we really achieved something out of that as a team, and that's really cool to look back on. And but being creative is fun. It should be fun. And I'm working on a project at the moment that's really abstract, really creative. How am I going to say it? But it'd be like that real stoner type thing, which traditionally I am such a literal person.
Like Fear and Loathing type?
It'd be very abstract and very silly. Think of Rick and Morty.
Oh,
think
okay.
But not cartoonish. But something that, you know, those weird thoughts that you have just before you go to bed that keep you awake all night.
Oh, man.
One of those.
Yeah.
And that's I'm really excited for it, and I've been holding on to it for a bit. I'm writing, I'm doing things, and it'd be very character focused, and people are probably going to hate it, but it's something creative that I'm doing for me, and I'm looking forward to it.
I actually, I love that idea, because I have these weird thoughts, and then I try and like explain them to my partner, and she's like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I love about the video element of things, because you can actually start to explain some of these images that come into your mind.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get out on paper, like to draw it or write it, because it just isn't doing it justice.
No.
It's a really difficult sort of process, but you know, like you said, it's really when it comes off, so satisfying. And I think you'd be surprised. Like, I think the show's called Big Les. Have you ever seen the Big Les show?
No.
It's like what you were talking about in terms of the genre.
Yep.
And you know, it's just got a big Yeti guy, and he's just always punching cones.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know whether that's user friendly, but
I don't care.
Basically, it's just that sort of thing.
Yeah.
People loved it. People ate it up. Like, it went viral, you know, and there's all those weird things that you think, oh, this is a bit strange, but maybe it will actually be super popular. And
Could be.
Yeah, so
it
don't
could be a
shoot
thing.
yourself down before you've got it out there.
No, it should be good. Hey,
Yeah.
I haven't shot anything with it yet. I've written some things. I'm right into comedy, and not that I never was, but now I'm right into it more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the podcasts that I listen to. I listen to a lot of comedians on podcasts. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I hear a lot of advice they take of don't be lazy. That's one of the big things. Don't be lazy and say, oh, that thought that I just had when I'm in bed, I'll think of that in the morning. They're gifts. So now I'm like, sketch it into my phone, or that's what I'll do now. And I listen to that and I'm like, that's really, because, you know, you look at comedians, most of them are like, you know, stoner humor, or they're like pretty lazy, sketchy dudes. There's so much into it, and they're sit up at night sketching things. I'm like, I'm going to take that advice on board. That's what I'm starting to do with this as well. Whereas in the past, I would have just went, I'll think of that in the morning, and
it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
You know? And they explain it as gifts. They're the gifts that you get. I'm like, that is a gift. And
it's like just before you're drifting off to sleep too. I don't know whether you get that, but it's that most annoying bit where you're like, if I do get up right now, I'm probably not going to sleep for a bit.
And I'm going to keep sketching something out.
Yeah, you know? And so I just generally, I try to just chuck it in my phone because it's just close to the bed, but my partner's like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, I've got to figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah, there's got to be. And that's the same as me. It'll go straight to the phone. And, you know, and as a writer, like when I went to film school, you know, I don't want to talk. This is about you, mate, today, but we're talking shop about cameras and stuff.
Yeah.
When I went to film school, they're like, oh, have you seen such and such a movie? I was the worst film school student because I hadn't seen any of the movies they wanted. I'm like, tell me about a Red Bull film, like tell me about such and such, and tell me about like, you know, a Toby Price documentary, or a Krusty Demons, or things that I'm interested in. The Closer to the Edge, the Isle of Man movie.
Oh,
things like that. Tell me about that. I'm interested, and this is why school was bad for a lot of kids too. You're not interesting me in this. They're like, oh, you really need to see such and such a movie. So I went and watched the movies they wanted me to see, and they were okay, and they're the critically acclaimed movies. Now I'm 5 years out of being through film school and stuff. I'm actually writing some of the things that they told me I should be writing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, maybe that was a good lesson, you know? And I'm like, maybe it was, you know? And at the time when I walked away from finishing up with that, I thought the education that I got was somewhat weakened by, I really wanted technical ability. I wanted my camera ability. I wanted this and that. But the first year was story. Give me a story. Story. And my stories were weak. It was like, you know, Tara, the motocross girl that wanted to have a motocross battle, and her brother was a better rider, or she was a better rider. My stories were everything that I grew up with. It was so literal. Now I'm starting to get, this is what developing a character might actually be.
Yeah.
You don't need to have the best camera. You need to have good story.
Yeah.
And that was their big thing. And now I'm like, oh, maybe that is the case. So,
yeah, you see a lot of people talking about it lately, actually. And story does beat like technical ability, I think, because, and it's shown every other day when not necessarily the really trendy type stuff, I suppose, but like on short form social media where there are very talented people who are able to hit a really important point and give that information across in a really interesting way and tell a story, but with 15 seconds. Oh, genius.
Gold.
Absolute genius. And so, like, they're just using a phone.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a X amount of $1,000 camera and lenses and all that. So that's why it's a bit of love-hate with that social media stuff too, because, like, you can see some really good, great work, but you can also see a little bit of the copy and trend type stuff that
for sure
spirals a bit.
Did you I never have. Did you ever get into the Gary Vee stuff?
Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah.
I've started one of his books.
Because he's that person that within 15 seconds can develop everything that you need to know. Like just can do it. It's like, wow, like I never got into listening to the whole thing, but every now and then I flick onto something, I'm like, oh, he's such a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Like he's got that down pat, you know, like, and it's literal stories, but he's got that 15 seconds, you know, down pat or whatever.
Yeah, and that took him how many years as well?
Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, and that's what I try and tell myself is like my first stuff that I put out is probably going to be cringy in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I looked back at some of my old stuff and I was like, yep.
It was cringy?
Yeah, it's cringy.
Yeah.
But that's about developing, I suppose, and finding out what works and what doesn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
We all can't be like, what was the brother? Was it Coen Brothers that made Dumb and Dumber? I'm trying to think who it was. I don't think it was. I forget who it was, but it was like one of their first films.
Oh, really?
Right.
Jeez.
And they make Dumb and Dumber. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like we can't all do that as their first film. You know, one of the top
Yeah.
5 comedies of all time. Obviously done heaps of short films and stuff too, but yeah, it's hard work.
I've got this really good story from when I was in Canada.
Yeah.
But so I had a tough year overseas in 2010.
Yep.
And the pressure cooker at work was really high in 2011. So I was like, I'm going to take some time off. And that was when I was like, yep, okay, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm going to be a bit of a ski bum. And then when the snow melts, I'm going to buy a motorbike and I'm going to ride down through like Central America and then Central America and that sort of stuff.
Wow.
And so I was initially like really interested, but then sort of things changed a little bit and I realised that I probably didn't have the budget to do it all the time, and also riding down through Central America I probably needed a buddy and I just couldn't get anyone. So I ended up shifting gear a little bit, but I bought a van for like $500 and it was one of those like V8 GM like RV type vans.
Right.
And it was people in a nice way described it as a creeper van.
Yeah.
There's much worse terms that probably come to mind.
But that's quite a nice way of saying it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I drove it from Vancouver to Whistler, and it was fine. It had these all-terrain tyre or all-weather tyres on it.
Yep.
I was like, oh, they must be all right then. And so parked up, and I lived in Whistler for about a month, and I was trying to get some work, but it was December, and to get work in Whistler, even 10 years ago, you needed to be there in like August at the latest to get snow season work because it was so popular. But I managed to stay with some friends and contribute to rent and that sort of stuff. And one of my friends came up with a name for the van. It was called Ivan Milat.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And luckily none of the Canadians or Americans twigged on the name.
Yeah,
so
nice.
it was kind of really good tongue-in-cheek name for it. But I took the van. I ended up getting work in Lake Louise near Banff. And that is just an amazing part of the world if you ever get the chance to go there. And one of my mates said at one point about halfway through the season, it was in February, and it was the coldest week in winter that we chose to go on this road trip down to America. Right. And so we drove this van and we were heading down the highway and it was minus 40 Celsius. And that's not a lie. Like
C, 40 degrees
minus
Celsius.
40 Celsius. So it's cold enough that when you're outside, your eyes kind of like itch and get a bit painful because the moisture in your eyes is starting to freeze.
Yeah.
And your nose as well, like your nose sticks together when you breathe in.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so it's just making my eyes water to think about it. But it's it was not a good drive in a van that was pretty old and heavy and on these all-weather tyres, which turns out don't work great in snow.
Right.
And it was puking snow, and we're freezing. I think I had double gloves, double beanie, double jacket, and we even had to stop in a servo and get one of those heat packs and put them in our boots because my feet were starting to like go numb.
Like in the vehicle?
Yeah, no heating. Yeah, and so we're driving down this road and this logging truck's about 8 to 10 car lengths in front of us, so a long way, and we're doing 60 maybe, 60 k's an hour. And I see it start to slow down. So I'm like, all right, put the brakes on. Nah, we're sliding. Okay. Off the brakes, on the brakes again. Yep, we're still sliding. Okay. Softer on the brakes. Nah, still sliding. And I was just looking at the back of this logging truck, and it, like the bed was eye level. Right. So I was like, that's going to come straight through the windscreen, and we are done. Yeah. So I sort of, this is how much time I had to think, by the way. Like, even though time's kind of moving in slow motion when you go through these experiences, I moved into the oncoming lane to get a peek around it. There was no one there, but then the truck started sliding across both lanes because it tried to turn. Yep. So I was like, well, there's no more other choice. Like, speared it off the side of the road, but it was probably about it was really sort of, the road was built on a berm sort of thing, so it had really steep drop off either side. Yep. And I thought, if I go off at an angle, we're rolling because the van is so cumbersome and tall. Yep. And so I steered it straight off, and we just aired straight off and did the whole like, and then crashed. Oh, no. And so all that happened was we popped a tyre and bent the back bumper.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky. And I've still got a photo of me. We had the presence of mind to take a photo of the berm, and the berm's like another 2 feet above my head, and I'm 5'6" on a good day.
One of those vans.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, anyway, we crashed right next to the logging yard because the logging truck must have been trying to turn in. Yep. And he sort of slid to a stop across both lanes and then managed to get himself out, and we realised that we couldn't access the jack to change the tyre because the back bumper was bent up in front of the back door. Yep. Inside the back door was the jack. So we drove it over, and this logging truck the kind of caterpillar thing that has a big claws on it and pulls the logs off the back of the logging truck. We got them to jack up the car with that, and then I managed to get the tyre iron out, and we changed the tyre in minus 40, and then we got back on the road. Like, thanks guys, no worries. Drove off, kept going, and we got to the border with the US, and I realised I didn't have my passport. I'd left it all the way back at our place in Banff, so I was kicking myself. So I had to turn back around, and of course the weather was absolutely stunning on the way back, and got back. I think we'd spent 10 hours on the road the day before getting to the border, and we ended up just getting a hotel next to the border, sleeping the night, and then driving back, and it took us 4 hours the next day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
and did you try again to go to the US?
No. Oh, I did later on.
Okay.
And I actually drove down to Los Angeles, and then we were, I think more damage got done to the van than I realised because I didn't really check it too much. And I managed to get down to Los Angeles, and then we were heading out towards the Grand Canyon, and the tail shaft dropped out of the bottom of the van. Yeah, right. In the middle of nowhere.
Not good.
Yeah, it was a place called Kingman, Arizona. Yep. And basically...
Whoa.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. We were going to the Grand Canyon. Yep. And I think you needed about 3 teeth to be able to live in that town.
Correct.
And the tow truck driver towed us back, and their welcome mat at the tow place was actually it wasn't like welcome. Yep. It was like no tweakers or crackheads. That was their welcome mat.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had to sort of basically scrap the van, grab all my stuff out of it, and get a hire car. And went back to LA, and then I flew across to the northeast, where I actually had gotten a job at a summer camp, and we were like, it's kind of like they call you counsellors, but you're kind of like big brothers and sisters at the summer camp. Yep. Which we had a great time, and that's a whole nother story, to be honest. That's another 2 hours worth of...
Really?
Yeah.
It would have been good, like, to go up to that. Like, that's something so different for us,
Oh, so amazing. And the Northeast has got to be my favourite part of the US.
Where'd it put you?
New Hampshire.
Okay. Yep.
which I love their motto. Their state motto is "Live free or die."
Yeah, right.
And they're one of the states where you can ride a motorbike with no helmet and just,
Yep.
YOLO
Freedom.
a little bit.
Yeah, freedom.
yeah, fully. But they're not sort of the real conservative. They're liberals, they're called, and not in an Australian sense of a liberal. It's like you are free to be your own person and do your own thing and live your own way and live the consequences of your own actions. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the closest city? I'm just trying to think. Like I've toured pretty extensively there. So what's the closest major city in New Hampshire?
There's actually a really big university there. Oh, it's killing me. Or college, as they call it. One of the bigger towns that's coming to mind, but it's not the one I'm thinking of, is Manchester.
Okay, yeah.
And then, it's absolutely killing me. It's a really big. They call it an Ivy League. College.
Yeah, right. Yep.
But it's
a cool part of the world, though, isn't it? Going over there, like it's stunning too.
Yeah.
Really stunning. And what I appreciated about driving up through that area for when I went there, was the flags. I'm a person that you should be patriotical about your country. I think it's 100% something that you should be proud of.
Yeah.
And going through those areas, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. Every house has it.
Yeah.
I really respect it, and I think something I really liked about it. I haven't been to America since 2016.
Yeah.
Something I really appreciate though is if you're on public transport, people standing up, the respect.
Yeah.
Veterans. We thank our veterans. Every public service you get. I don't know. There's something.
Yeah.
You should be proud of it.
And I'm definitely. I definitely do appreciate that, and I think Australia is good with it as well.
For sure. Yep.
I think the veteran sort of term, I see good and bad uses of it.
Okay.
So I don't think veterans are incapable of doing bad things as well, though. I think to the point where people can't even say, oh, that person's done something stupid or bad.
You get blindfolded by some.
Yeah, a little bit. And I thought it was pretty novel at the time, like on planes and that sort of stuff. Like if you fly American Airlines, they're like, everybody, we've got some veterans on board today, give them a round of applause. And I was like, geez, I deserve this. I just did my job.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of Australian veterans are like. Yep. They've kind of, Hollywood has latched onto it a little bit in certain terms too, which I don't know how I feel about it, but I think there's definitely stories worth telling there, but also with some of the stuff that's gone on in the past 10 years, you can't also, you need to accept some of the good with the bad, I suppose, is the thing there. And to be honest, I am proud of what I did, but I don't like to go out and tell people that, I suppose. No. I don't know.
But we as humans, all make mistakes too.
Yeah. Yep.
That's something and that's hard for people to also talk about, is mistakes, mistakes that have been made and ownership of things and whatnot. But at the same time, no matter what I guess no matter what you're doing, if you've done it in your best interest, that you've been identified in front of you, you've got to be proud of those things. And there's a lot of 2020 hindsight where people look back at things and question what happened, but you've got to make a decision with the information you have at the time. Yep. And the Army trains a lot of people to go through a very rigorous decision-making process. I will say that's one thing that they are really good at. Decision processing.
The understanding a problem very quickly, or understanding it in depth quickly, and then making a decision, a timely decision. Yep. Because there's kind of a term that they use as, a good decision, an 80% decision on time is better than a 100% decision too late.
Yeah. It's such an interesting one, and just that was one of my takeaways from there. I just drove around up through. There's a place called Bethel.
Oh, right.
Up in I forget what state it's in. Might be up in New York State still. I think maybe I'm not too sure, but it's where Woodstock was originally held.
Oh yeah, yep.
And a big Amish community there, and I just seen how they lived out there, and I'm like, this is just a real cool place. I really identify with this place. This is a neat place, and just a proud place, proud of their area.
Yeah.
Lots of freedoms, like you're saying, and I just enjoyed where it was, So.
Yeah. Have you been to Texas? The
Briefly.
Flags there.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've seen some of the flags. They're like 3 stories high in front of like a car dealership.
Wow.
And they're just, it's like almost a competition of
who's got the bigger flag.
Yeah.
We flew. What did we do? We're in New Orleans. And road tripped up to get to Texas because it was the major airport to get a flight back to the West Coast.
Yep.
And so very briefly, I don't even remember it really. It was late at night, hotel out.
Okay.
Haven't really been into
New
that
Orleans is a cool place too.
Yeah, very interesting place.
Yeah,
definitely a very interesting place, and one that will never recover from hurricanes. It never will. You go into for instance, like you go to Bourbon Street,
Yeah.
You go into a bathroom in Bourbon Street, and you can, the remnants of, they'll never touch it because that's how it is, that's the history of that area and through the French Quarter and stuff. And lovely place though.
Oh, unreal. And the people there are so nice.
It's magic, eh?
Yeah.
It's,
You're
got
looking
some
forward to going back?
Yeah, I am. I got some funny stories about New Orleans and stuff.
Shouldn't see the light of day.
Nah. My partner Annie and myself went over. I think it was our last trip to the States, and it was just a crazy time, crazy night. And it was one of those nights that, you remember the first Hangover movie?
Yeah.
It's like at the end where it should destroy the camera.
Yeah.
Just destroy the camera.
Yeah.
Like, we were supposed to go out on a boat tour out through the bayou.
Oh, yeah.
The next day.
Yep.
Made it to the Hard Rock Cafe next door, didn't eat, just didn't move. Like, just wasted a day of the life. And something must have happened that night before that just, it could be one of those nights that maybe should just forget that. It's good though. But that's travel. That's the eyes opening of the world.
Yeah.
I got to get you to talk about Kingman, because that's on Route 66, just on the edge of Route 66.
Yep.
Did you have to spend a night there or anything?
I didn't actually. So I was dumb enough to buy this dodgy van and try to drive it across the country, but I was smart enough to get insurance.
Good move.
Yeah, and so we spent a bit of time in the McDonald's. I actually barely saw it, but it's a real small town. And I don't know whether you've seen, the Sacha Baron Cohen
the last one?
America thing that he did.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you remember the place he goes in and announces that they're going to build a mosque. That's Kingman.
Was it really?
Yeah. And the people in there, they were, ready to shoot someone. Yeah.
That was. Did you like that movie? This is going to be. This is like, if I'm a psychologist.
Yeah.
This is a character test.
Oh, is it? I liked how he held a mirror up to. Yeah, I did. I actually
part of an experiment.
Yeah, I think what he was doing was holding a mirror up to America, so they could see themselves. Like, I think it was Rudy Giuliani, the stuff that he got him to do, and just put it out there. I was floored. Like, I couldn't believe some of the stuff.
The guy was oblivious.
Yep, and the level of what they think is acceptable to do in life, and not to mention the fact there's also a camera present. Like, he shouldn't do it anyway, but there's also a camera present. Like, jeez.
Man, he was oblivious to the consequence.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is a normal everyday thing. This is just what it is. And you just looked at it like, I'm sure this is a prank that he's aware of.
Yeah.
Like, is it set up? Is it a jackass style thing where it's, but it didn't seem it. Like, it was legit. And as if, like, what was his position then? He was like, not Attorney General, but he was like counsel.
Yeah, something like that.
Like a position of influence and power.
Yep.
And just no idea of the consequence.
Yeah.
Crazy. It was a good one. I really enjoyed it. I think if I'm looking at a character for myself, I look at as a character reference. Maybe I'm a dodgy character because I enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, I loved it.
It was funny.
No, I reckon it's great.
Yeah.
And Sacha Baron Cohen's a smart dude. Like, he some of his comedy is kind of like a bit, but the reasons behind why he's doing what he's doing is actually, like, you think about it and you're like, that guy is a genius.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a smart cookie.
Yeah.
He really is. You got to appreciate those ones because end of the day, he could quite easily be silenced out there in the current world of
NDAs and
people wanting to
lawyers.
not buy it, lawyers and things like that. Amazon saying, no, we don't, because it was an Amazon movie.
Oh, yeah.
We don't want that coming through this. But they seem to be actually extremely lenient of what they let through. Amazon. They've let through a few things, and I'm like, whoa, that could have, especially like Rudy Giuliani within the Trump government at the time was part of it. Part of that group of people, and like, wow, how much power do you have at that point? So, and for him, I'm sure he could have put an embargo on it forever, and he didn't. That's a nice thing. But who knows? Good movie, though.
Yeah. It's actually pretty interesting, the amount of control in media. When you kind of have a peek behind the curtain of what they do and don't let through. And I think that's why podcasts like this and, like citizen journalism is really important. Like, you're seeing some of the stuff coming out of the Ukraine is unreal. And it's because there's citizens that have the capability to take a video of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
I remember maybe a month or two before Russia invaded Ukraine, there was people in Russia putting up on social media videos of just trains of armoured vehicles heading towards the Ukraine, like the western border for Russia.
As in preparation for it?
Yep. Yep. And everybody saw it coming, but like you wouldn't have had even a clue if it was just your standard journalism, because Russia just won't let journalists talk about stuff. They just chuck them in jail.
Yeah. They check, like quite literally. They just silence them, and I'd hate to guess how it's going to end. I don't know how it'll end, but
we're definitely the closest we've been to a world war in 70 odd years or something.
1945.
Yeah.
I got to ask you this last question, because we're pretty close to memory cards, and I've kept you for a long time.
Oof.
When you got home 2010, 2011, you went over to Canada. You went to the States. Did it help?
In terms of like helping relax?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was a different person by the end of that.
Home? Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I was wound up really tight.
Yeah, okay.
Because there was a lot of pressure. And really, really quick story that explains a bit of the pressure. I actually got in a lot of trouble. We also managed some of they called it VVIP accommodation. And so the Prime Minister at the time came through to, we called it battlefield tourism. That was how we saw it. But they called it something more politically sound. But basically, they would come in so they could see what's actually happening on the ground, and their political decisions are sending people to do certain stuff and dying basically.
Absolutely.
And so he came for, I think he was in the staging base for about 6 hours, and I got in trouble because he didn't have shampoo in his VVIP accommodation. Like there wasn't a little like gift shampoo like a hotel, and I was like, I cracked it a bit, and I was like, we're not a hotel. He's just about to go into a place that is a lot more hostile than a hotel room.
Yeah.
And my boss was like, that's not the point, we've got to do this and that. And I was just sort of said, well, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
The pressure that people put on those situations, I was like, this is a really good example of something super trivial, but it's just also a bit ridiculous when you say the words out aloud. So I came back pretty wound up from that. That was by far not the worst thing that happened, but it was something that is probably a bit more palatable to talk about.
Is that Kevin Rudd? 2010?
Yeah.
Would have been, hey?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to go through my head. We had a few leader changes at that time. I'm like, well, must have been. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I can't remember whether it was while we were there that actually Kevin Rudd was in, and then Julia Gillard came in after, ousted him, and and she actually came in as well. So during my tour, we had 2 different prime ministers visit.
Yeah.
And they both brought 50 odd people with them.
Okay.
I was like, holy moly, that's a big entourage.
Well, as in
50 political assistants and
really,
all sorts of people, PR
protection,
people,
PR, everything.
Well,
okay.
I'm pretty sure the Defence Force ended up
provide their own protection.
Provided a protection party,
because they're the ones that are on base. They know the base, obviously.
Yeah. And they actually, they had special people looking after them, but it's pretty interesting. And coming back, I was super wound up. I would probably get a bit too upset about things that were trivial.
Yeah.
And I think just a change of scenery, change of pace, and the summer camp that I went to, that probably had the best effect on me, because I got to just be pretty relaxed, and I still had a lot of responsibility with these young teenagers, trying to shape them and do the right thing around them, that sort of stuff. But it was just a lot more welcoming and natural and that sort of stuff. That's actually part of, I kind of felt really welcome from day one in that place.
Yep.
And that's actually part of what I try to replicate when we're at Skinnies. I stole that little tidbit from those guys, is literally just, a new person shows up, walk up, shake their hand, say welcome, what's up, and start to try to ask them some questions about themselves.
Get them in.
They're
part of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because people like to hear, people like to talk about themselves, which you probably know very well.
and it's good. It is it's a thing that you try and put away, but it's nice to hear from people. You know?
Yeah.
Communication. It's the only thing that we've really got to. It's a tool. It's a tool that's not used enough anyway.
Yeah.
So that helped, going over there.
Yeah, definitely. I came back, and so I actually had still a contract with the Army I had to fulfill.
Yep.
So I had to come back and go back into the Army after that, and I spent 2 years in there, and I actually deployed again in 2014, and that wasn't as high pressure, but I did end up getting embedded in one of the headquarters with the Americans.
Yep.
And so we ended up we were involved in trying to help the elections along at the time, and that made me really hopeful for Afghanistan at the time, because things like we met farmers when they vote, they dip their finger in blue ink and then they put their fingerprint down and then vote. And the idea is that's a really rudimentary way to track who's voted and who hasn't.
Yep.
So they can't double vote and all that sort of stuff. But the Taliban then come around and chop people's fingers off when they find out they've voted, because they've got the blue ink stain on their finger that doesn't come off for weeks. So these farmers who work with their hands, their livelihood, the way they stay alive is their hands, and they are still going out and voting and dipping their finger in the ink. And there was one farmer we found, and I think he had two fingers and his thumb left on his right hand.
Yep.
Because Taliban had taken the other two, and he came up and the PR person took a photo of him giving the finger to the camera with his blue stained middle finger, and I thought that was great. I thought, like, there's hope for this place yet. This is an old fella who wants to see a better way for his country, better place for his children. But unfortunately, the Taliban's tactics are so brutal that it's very hard to stand against them, and the collective will of the Afghan people hasn't cemented yet. Like, it hasn't reached a point where they've really just picked themselves up by their bootstraps and gone against the Taliban, because it's so hard for them to do. And the West tried to help, but there's only so much you can help someone. They've got to help themselves. And unfortunately, we saw in the last 12 months where that went, which is a real shame, to be honest. Like, the Taliban are not nice people, and they made a lot of promises so that the West would say, yep, okay, we'll move out. And now we're seeing them wind back those promises one by one. They're women who are on broadcast TV, even in the last week or so. I think they've got to wear full face garb and not show their faces on TV. And I'm pretty sure, if they haven't already, they're working on young women not being able to go and get an education, which the reason they do that is because educated people know better. And if they stop them being educated, they don't know any better.
Man, it's actually something I wasn't going to ask you about the last 12 months. Obviously, it's okay to not have an opinion. I guess that's one thing as well for people. But do you have one? Just sad.
I'm sad about it. I've got friends of mine who gave their life to try and make that place better. And it feels almost like it didn't achieve a whole lot. Even though at the time we were achieving a lot, it's kind of gone to the point now where it's wound back a lot. And long term, I think we have planted the seed of what the people in Afghanistan know will be better for them, because we didn't go in necessarily to, the first reason they went into Afghanistan was just to get Osama bin Laden. Like, it's well documented and well known. But they stayed, and for better or worse, a lot of stuff happened. A lot of people lost their lives, both Afghan civilians and military. And I don't think right now the current country is not better off for it. But I'm hoping in the long term that it is, because it's a beautiful country and the people there are absolutely lovely people. But it's just some people are just absolutely ruining it for everybody. And it's really sad to see. And I think that there's a lot of really, like, people talk about good and evil and that sort of stuff, and I can understand that nobody's the bad guy in their own story, But some of those people, you wonder how they justify what they're doing to other human beings. Yeah.
Just entrenched, just so far ingrained. Sorry.
Yeah, I think they slowly get used to some kind of, like bit by bit, they go down a path where things that are horrible for one person become the norm for them, maybe.
Yep.
And they're so driven in what they want to achieve and what they think is right for people that they're willing to do anything and not compromise.
Yep.
I think not listening to someone else's side of the story and making compromises is one of the worst things that you can do as a society, and it just ends up, like you said, it's communication, right? But it's not just speaking the words, it's listening to the words and absorbing what someone's saying and their perspective. And I think that's one thing that is unfortunately not really happening in one of the parties anyway.
Like at our era of people, do you think we've gotten better as a society? Like, you look at the events over there, you look at obviously Russia, Ukraine, you look at
It's a bit of rain.
Rain again.
Yeah.
Again. Things like that. Do you think we've gotten better? Like, we don't have a World War II happening at the moment.
Yeah.
We don't look like we're too far away from it. If you look at some things, you're like, oh my goodness, this is the closest in my lifetime I've ever seen to something like a world war. Do you think we've gotten better as a society?
Geez, that's a hard question to answer. I think we have in some respects.
Yep.
And I think it would be very wrong of me to give like a black and white answer, because that's kind of what I don't believe is right.
Yep.
I think there are shades of grey, and I think to be honest, that's a question I ask myself every day and I can't answer.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
my answer is I have no answer, which is terrible, but I'm not. I just think it's a very difficult one.
I think all you can do, it's so cliche, but just yourself, eh? Just do you, and if you can do better each day, I guess that's a good thing. And
Yep. And that's kind of what, like, we just try and shine a little bit of light in our corner.
Yep.
Of whatever we can try to help people with. And I think the world is a big place, and a lot of people have big grandiose plans, but I also think a lot of what happens that matters is on smaller scale and important, and can build up to a bigger, it can build momentum up to have a bigger effect. Like, people want to do these grand things. It's like, just start small, do it well, and make people's lives that little bit better, and you'll be surprised.
Not everything has to be top down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, mate, we'll leave that there. This has been a journey. We've talked about we've strayed off from talking about motorbikes to some different things, and we're pretty close to 3 hours. On that.
Oof.
I'd like to do another one at some point. Like,
sure.
I'd like to see how. Obviously, I'd like to see Skinnies grow over the next 6, 12, 10, whatever months. And I'd like to do another one and talk further about, obviously, the garage.
Yep.
And things you're doing professionally as well outside of your own business and your own work. I'm a nerd when it comes to drones and cameras and stuff. I really enjoy it. A bit self-indulgent, really. So we'll have to talk more about that.
Yeah.
Where can people find, obviously, the garage online?
Yep.
And yourself and all those other details too?
Cool. So easiest place to find Skinny's Garage on social media is Instagram, and it's at skinnies.social. And then our Facebook page is Skinny's Social Garage, not to be confused with Skinny's Garage. So Skinny's Garage is the mechanic side of the business, traditional mechanic, drop your bike in, mechanic does the work, 9 to 5, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then after hours and on weekends, we have the social garage. So it's the social part's important, and we have a lot of people messaging us in the social garage asking for us to fix their stuff, and I'm like, that's cool. If you want to be a member, we can show you how to do it. But if you're actually looking from the mechanical side, I'd try and push them that way. But and we share the website, so it's www.skinniesgarage.com.au/social. And that takes you to a bit of an information page, and you can kind of click through and find out a bit more. But we're definitely more active on Instagram and Facebook, and that's where we kind of put a lot of events and things up. We have started a YouTube channel, Skinny Social Garage, and we've been putting up some videos because I like making videos.
Yep.
So we've put up a few of those sort of initiatives that we've done. We had a women's wrench night the other day, and taught some women how to work on their own bikes and that sort of stuff, which was really good. So we threw up a quick video of that and those sorts of things. The plan is to eventually, hopefully, start to do a little bit of videos of how to do stuff as well on that YouTube, and then maybe a bit more skills in the members section on the website as well. But yeah, that's where you can find us, or you can just come down to 76 Abbotsford Road, Bowen Hills. And so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights after 5, and then all day Saturdays, we're open for the social garage. And you can just come and visit us, say g'day. We have a Fast Fridays, which is kind of just a social meet and greet. We have usually throw on a barbie or get some pizzas in, and you can become a temporary member for the day or night, and have access to the beer fridge, the coveted beer fridge. Yep. And have a feed and that sort of stuff, and get use out of the garage. If you're not sure whether you want to become a member or something like that, you come down and get the true experience and meet people and learn about bikes without having to just commit to a membership. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, mate, I'll have to come along again to another one, to another function, and once this garage film stuff happens too, I think they're doing the Desert Set Dance one at the moment.
That's exactly what they're trying to do at our garage.
Oh, good. Yeah, I really want to see that. I've got some friends in that.
Yeah. Oh, right. The Baja 1000, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I really want to see that one.
Yeah.
And I know they're representing it here in Australia, Garage Films.
Yep.
So, I'd like to try and maybe come along to that if that happens. And
yeah, definitely.
Come and hang out for a bit.
That'll be great.
Cool, mate. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Cheers, Mick. Thanks for having me.
That's all we have time for in today's show. If you get the chance, head over to YouTube and hit subscribe on the Talk and Chatter page. Also, head over to iTunes and give us a star rating and a review there. It all helps to get the podcast out there. A big thank you goes to everyone that's been doing this already, and we'll be back with another show soon.